Camera's buffering. Camera's live.
Thank you. Good morning, fellow directors. As we gather virtually throughout the traditional territories of the Coast Salish people, I welcome you to today's special corporate services agenda. I would also like to welcome Director Martman to his first corporate services meeting. Looks like he picked a good time to come in right in the middle of budget discussion, so welcome. And hopefully we can get through today. In the interest of time management, I'm wondering if we want to go through the reports all at once, or if there are some that just need to be pulled for discussion. So I'm just gauging the interest of the directors prior to starting today and see what your thoughts are. Director Acton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can't answer that question. I have no preference, whatever you feel is the quickest, but I do have a question for staff, and I'm wondering if I could ask it at this time. I'm wondering, do we have a total budget for all the budgets that are being presented if as approved, approved as presented? Do we have a budget that we have? Do we have a total?
So you're looking for a percentage on the?
Yeah, if all the budgets were approved as presented, what kind of taxation would we be at? Do we have those numbers?
Ms. Soldera, do you have a quick answer to that?
So as originally presented, if all of the supplemental requests and business cases are approved, it would equal 3.11%. I think that there will be some interesting discussions coming out of the first couple of reports today that may impact that number.
Director Sebring?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have turned off my video because I'm having some bandwidth issues. I hope my audio is okay. To your suggestion about basically doing a consent agenda on the whole thing, not the only, but the main one that I'm interested in discussing and that I'd like to pull would be under R4 bullet 7, the Regional Parkland Acquisition Fund. I think we need to talk about that one from my perspective. Most of the rest of them, I'd be happy to do them as a consent agenda. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Director Morrison?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I ask everyone else if they're having trouble hearing the chair. I don't know if I'm missing words here and there, but you're sounding really garbled from my end. And yeah. So that's the first thing. And secondly, I've done an awful lot of reading over the last 3 days, and I've got, I think I've got things to discuss in for sure R3, R4, and R5. So, you know, it's whatever your pleasure is. I think there's some detail and some discussions need to be had throughout here. So.
Okay, thank you. Director Smith. I don't have you, Director Smith, if you can hear me.
You're muted.
Okay, I'm unmuted. And thank you for letting me know. I would like to pull R7, R9, number 16, and those are the R8, 1, R8, 4.
Okay, I have Director Marsh, but it looks like we're just going to go through it. So why don't we just go through it as we go, and then we'll go from there. Director Marsh and then Director Stone. You're muted as well, Director Marsh.
Yeah, it's a moot point, if I can make a funny pun, because yeah, I was fine with the consent agenda, but it doesn't look like that's the way we're going.
And Director Stone.
All I was going to say was that when I spoke with you earlier, what I meant was when we get to each item, some of them we'll only need to discuss one or two items, was to say under R4, which items do we want pulled, and then move the rest as a block. But we can do that as we go through the agenda. Thanks.
Sounds good. So let's move back, if we can, Ms. Legault, to approval of the agenda. Do I have a mover on that? Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That motion carries. Next, Ms. Legault, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On to public input period. I'm going to start the timer. This submission is from David Slade, Cobble Hill, Budget Deliberations and Parks Acquisition Fund. I know many of you CVRD directors and several of your senior staff, and deeply respect the dedication you all show and sacrifices you make in your service to our communities. I know that you're informed and intelligent people who understand the science of climate change and see the steady degradation of the ecological support systems and biodiversity that have allowed us to thrive in this beautiful region. I believe that you understand the value of parks and protected wild places like forests and wetlands. Not just the value they add for beauty and recreation, but the priceless services they provide to filter our water and nurture our wildlife. In 2008, you asked us if we wanted to create a tax-based fund to purchase and protect land as parks for future generations. It was a visionary move by the CVRD, and the Parks Acquisition Fund was approved by referendum. This allowed the CVRD to assess up to approximately $5 per $100,000 of property value annually, which today would raise approximately $1.4 million. An amount that could preserve and protect significant land in the public interest every year at a cost of less than $25 per year for most property owners, up to around $50 per year for those owning homes assessed at $1 million. In 2019, the board chose to lower that number to just 67 cents per 100,000, raising only $150,000, which we all know could purchase almost no land at all. I'm sure that all of us can think of some wild or vital or magical places worthy of or in need of protection. A couple that spring to mind are Shaw Creek, west of Yubo, an area identified extremely important ecologically and culturally, and the Cook-style old-growth forest, which is an incredible stand of ancient trees that continues to survive despite long odds and the threatening ongoing threat of logging. Between myself, business interests, and family, we pay taxes in 6 different electoral areas and municipalities. As a taxpayer, I plead with you to assess the full amount that we taxpayers authorized in 2008, use that money to invest in our grandchildren's future, and chart a new path towards a region that has at least a shot at sustainability. The long-term benefit to all of preserving these places is priceless, and future generations will applaud these investments made at what is truly only modest cost to us property owners. This submission is from Perry Foster, North Cowichan. Dear Board, as a citizen of the Cowichan Valley, I'm deeply concerned about the potential issues being brought up by the proposed R4 Function 285 Parkland Acquisition Initiative. It's my understanding that an increase from $250,000 to $1.4 million in 2021 will be recommended for parkland acquisition once again in the name of climate emergency. This amount represents a sharp increase in funds that cannot help but be shouldered by residents of the Cowichan Valley in the form of a sharp and exorbitant increase in taxation. Considering the fact that residents of the Cowichan Valley already experience regular increases in their taxes and are finding these increases difficult to bear, the R4 Parkland Acquisition Initiative will only prove an additional burden, and we have to question whether or not it is necessary. As a citizen of the Cowichan Valley, I agree with the 2019 board resolution recommending a 0% increase in the budget during these challenging times. The R4 Function 285 Parkland Acquisition Initiative should be denied and spending should remain at current levels. The next submission is from Genevieve Singleton. I'd like to, dear CVRD directors, this is to express my concern about the Park Acquisition Fund being at a lower amount than voted for in the 2008 referendum. This year it could be a total of $1.405,493. Instead, it is at $250,000. In these days of increasing land prices, $250,000 does not allow CVRD to buy anything, let alone to be nimble if an unexpected opportunity arises to buy a significant ecological property such as Shaw Creek. In 2008, there was a $500,000 in the PA. By 2014, it was at $853,115, where it stayed until 2019, when it was, with no notice to the community at large, dropped to $150,000. I was reassured when I heard this that it was a one-off and would be returned to its proper level. This did not happen in 2020. It was only raised to $250,000. It is hard work that citizens charge directors with to run a tight budget to keep our community viable and safe. This is particularly challenging to do in a one-year budget. I ask you to do something different, please. Think of a 1,000-year timeline. What do we want our community looking like 1,000 years from now with increased population and climate change? With this in mind, we need to set aside more land, not necessarily serviced, to protect our rare and vulnerable ecosystems. We're still fortunate to have rare coastal Douglas fir and Garry oak ecosystems within our boundaries. We have a responsibility to protect these for all time. I had the amazing good fortune to be the local lead of the creation of the Eagle Heights Provincial Park in 2018. I was personally told by several high-level government officials at the time that the fact the CVRD had funds set aside to buy this showed that our community was strongly invested in wanting to create new parks and protected areas. In the end, the funds were not needed since CVRD and BCWF were able to obtain a large grant, but the intent was there. Right now, that intent is not showing. Let us work together to protect our special places by having funds available in the amounts agreed on by the public in referendum. Let us leave a legacy for the future. Thank you for your hard work and kind attention. The next submission is from Susan Kaufman, Zatlam. Good morning, Mr. Chair. I'd like to speak to item R4, Regional Parkland Acquisition, and would like to ask the committee to consider the following before endorsing a zero increase for Function 285. The community endorsed the Parkland Acquisition Fund via referendum. The CVRD has since systematically reduced the funding amounts in subsequent budgets. Not all parkland acquisitions are for organized parks that require ongoing maintenance or funding. Parkland can be conservation areas, afford watershed protection, or are held in placemaking for larger initiatives such as green spaces, trails, and connectivity for the future. Maintaining a healthy parkland acquisition fund affords the CVRD to leverage, to explore, and to seize upon opportunities to obtain lands that may not otherwise be attainable. This is not a local example, but identifies how the CRD is using a healthy parkland acquisition fund to obtain a valuable property through partnerships and community-based funding initiatives. And she provides a link to a Times Colonist article on CRD contributing $2 million to preserve 20 hectares of forest in Saanich. And she concludes with, please reconsider the zero increase with a modest amount to keep building for the future. The next submission is from Ken Trainer, President of the Cowichan Lake and River Stewardship Society. Dear regional directors, the CLRSS and its members who live, work, and recreate in the Cowichan Valley urge you to reconsider the dollar figure of $250,000 that is currently in the proposed budget under Function 285, Regional Parkland Acquisition. We feel the reduction in funding in recent years from the original much higher earlier levels until 2018 for this function violates the spirit of the 2008 referendum decision on this issue. A return to the original amounts the electorate endorsed would increase the cost per $100,000 of assessed value per household this year from $1.06 to $4.06. It is our view that residents of the Valley have clearly shown they value that great green spaces we have and understand what a great legacy investment our collective action can be. Valley citizens gave Council clear direction in 2008 and have been comfortable paying their share when asked. We urge you to follow that direction and restore funding levels to those intended under the original bylaw 3772. The challenges of these COVID times just reinforces the wisdom of protecting and expanding parkland to nourish our mental health, our physical well-being, and our valley ecosystems. The next submission is from Cliff Evans, Chairperson. Why is there such a significant increase in budget for the following functions? R6 Function 520, Solid Waste Management 2021, page 6, Legal Services 2019, 9,397, 2020, 75,000, and 2021, 75,000. Consultants 2019, 10,964, and in 2020, 125,500, and in 2021, 125,500. The next submission is from Diane Moen, North Cowichan. I'm asking you to Okay, this is in reference to regional parkland acquisition. It may not be obvious to those board members advocating for this recommended increase, but many residents in the Cowichan Valley are under financial stress and psychological duress due to the COVID-19 situation. The board needs to understand that any tax increases will only exacerbate current situations. It is noted that staff recommended a 0% increase as per directions from a 2019 board resolution, and it still makes sense to disallow any increases at this time. A 0% increase is reasonable and necessary. The CVRD board are the employees of the citizens of the Cowichan Valley, but some members appear to be acting as lobbyists for agendas external to those supported by taxpayers, and I would like to remind members to check their bias when working on behalf of those taxpayers. Thank you for considering my concerns and observations. And the final submission is from Bernard Yerlink, Mill Bay, item R4 number 7. In the past, a much higher amount was allocated for parkland acquisition. In this time of climate crisis and deterioration of species diversity, there should be more forest land and wetlands set aside. I think the amount set aside for parkland acquisition should be much higher. And that concludes public input period.
Thank you, Ms. Legault, and thank you everyone for directing your public input questions. I think we can see from the majority of those that a relook at the regional parkland function, as we have discussed before, is probably a great idea. So moving forward, Ms. Legault.
Thank you. So we're on to reports, Mr. Chair. Item R1 is the report from Facilities and Transit Division on the 2021 draft budget for Function 106, Commuter Transit Services. And I believe Mr. Wakeham has some introductory comments.
Great. Mr. Wakeham, if you shall.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll turn my camera on here, and if I'm having some transmitting issues, just let me know and I'll shut it off. So to start, I know the directors are in for a long day of meetings here, and to start with the transit budgets that currently have some large tax increases. It's not the way we wanted to start the day, but I do have some good news to update the committee that affects the reports very positively. And I think after you hear the updates, it'll likely reduce the amount of discussion on the two transit budget reports, both R1 and R2. So as you can see in both Function 106, which is R1, and Function 107, R2 reports, COVID has hit our ridership and fare revenue really hard. And in order to get the two draft budget requisition increases down, and in particular Function 106, down 176,000 as low as possible, staff have outlined some various options for your consideration that you see in the report. And the options include some serious service reductions that I do want to thank BC Transit, Myrna Moore and her team, and our transit staff. We spent a lot of time and effort analyzing some options to even present to you. As I mentioned in the two reports, the reports unfortunately had to be prepared and submitted prior to the CVRD learning of the federal and provincial BC restart funding for the transit systems. So we had to include some expected cost reductions in our lease fees, but no grant funding regarding any fare losses. So here are the updates, and there's two. One is on November the 30th, staff attended a virtual meeting with BC Transit and other local government staff, and we were informed at that time that we'd be receiving sizable funding, our share of the $86 million that was set aside. And the funding was based on forecasted fare revenue reductions and estimated additional COVID expenses. And the amounts would be outlined in our AOA, which is the annual operating agreement. That's the budget that we sign with BC Transit each year, which we were to receive the following week. Normally we get those agreements in the spring in April on the provincial year, but due to COVID, it was delayed until the restart funding was known. So the second update is I just received the AOAs on Monday, less than 48 hours ago. That is definitely going to affect both reports here today. But I do need to say that I haven't had a chance to go through and find detail the exact funding, what it equates to, but it does cover 2 years. So from April 1 of 2020, which is a retroactive adjustment of 9 months for this year, and it goes through until March 31 of 2022. So from our November 30th virtual meeting, we didn't receive any specific dollar amounts that we would know of, but we did learn that the funding was tied to the agreement that the province had done with BC Ferries TransLink, and it comes with 3 conditions that are really important here. And the first condition is that the fares were to remain at affordable levels for the next 3 years, which, as of Monday, I learned when I got the AOA agreement and the information, fares cannot increase more than an average of 2.3% which is about a nickel per year for the next 3 years. And in 2022, that was the year that staff were going to suggest we raise and adjust fare increases, which normally in the past has been about 25 cents on our 225 cash fare, and whatever that equivalent percentage is on monthly fares. So that's the first condition that affects our report, because there is a suggestion on raising fares. Number 2 is that the service levels be maintained. So the service reduction options that are outlined in the report are not allowed if we were to receive the funding. And the third condition, which is achievable, is that the annual operating agreement must be approved and signed and returned to BC Transit by January 31st of 2021. So with those 3 conditions, the majority of the options outlined in both reports, R1 and R2, are really not valid. Even though I've not had a chance to review the funding agreement and AOA in detail, I can advise you that the funding for the commuter service is approximately $606,000 over a 2-year period. So that's $303,000 per year. And I will advise on the conventional and handy DART, which is function 107 in the next report. With the funding retro to April of 2020, so that's going back 9 months, I'm expecting that for 2020, we should be in a surplus, which is a really nice situation, because I was expecting a 6-figure deficit here. So that's great to hear on that. Regarding the report and the 2021 budget, it would appear that with restart funding, the draft tax increase that I show of $176,000 will likely be 0 or even less. But again, I need to just remind you, I do need to spend more time to look at the information. So to sum up for function 106, with the good news, I'm not sure if the committee still wishes to discuss today any of the non-service or fare change items, which I think only leaves 2 in the report. One would be the deferral of the staff position, and 2 is the South End Park and Ride expansion initiative. Or would it be more prudent for the committee to wait until January, when I will provide updated budgets? I'll take the information from the grants and the AOA and provide it then. And that's kind of the update where we sit today. So I turn it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I have Director Stone and Director Marsh on my list. Anyone else while I'm looking? And Director Morrison. Let's start with Director Stone.
Thank you. So, Mr. Wakeham, I wonder if it's appropriate to, being that it's sort of nebulous and we're not quite sure about the impacts of this funding, that we do forward this agenda item to our first discussion to our first opportunity to discuss in January.
Mr. Chair, through to Mr. Stone. Yeah, I think that's prudent. I think what I'm trying to say to you is we got really good news. That when you open the meeting with these massive tax increases for function 106 and 107, those are not going to happen. They're going to come down to 0 or even less. And so that I know. I just need to be able to go through, because the agreement is a little bit complex. There's a funding side, and there's some adjustments to the annual operating agreement with regard to lease fees and other stuff. So I can't even give you a motion today that would suggest something that you could vote on, because I think it'd be too immature for me to do that at this point. But it is good news. I want you to know that those big amounts are going to come down dramatically.
Follow-up, Director Stone?
So being that the agreements have to be signed by the end of January, is there enough time if we forward this item to the January 13th Corporate Services meeting?
Mr. Chair, through to Mr. Stone, yes, the intent would be I'd bring back on January the 13th the revised 2021 budgets, and I will outline because when I go into function 107 next, it's a little bit different, but the intent would be the same. I'll show here's the current tax increase the way it sits today, and then with the grant funding and other adjustments coming down to 0 or thereabouts, then we'll have enough time, because it would have to go to the second board meeting, I guess, would be January the 27th, and still get enough time to sign and return by January 31.
Okay, thank you. I'll let the other speakers speak, but I'd be prepared to support a referral to that meeting. Thank you.
Okay, I have Director Marsh next.
Yeah, I actually would like to move that we refer to that meeting.
You just let me go through my speakers list, and we'll come back. I have Director Morrison, Did I miss someone else? I have Director Staples. Director Acton, did you have your hand up? Okay, Director Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief. This really aligns with a lot of the thoughts that I was, hoping for, maintaining service and the likes. And I think that us having a look in January with being able to look at those outstanding issues that Mr. Wakeham mentioned is it's not good news, it's great news, and would support a referral to January. Thank you.
Director Wilson, did I see your hand? Anyone else while we're here? Okay, I will entertain that referral motion, Director Marsh, if you wish to make that.
I do wish to make it.
And Director
Do you need
Wilson,
to have me
second.
second it?
Any discussion on the referral, propriety of referral?
All I would
Okay,
say is
call
it's kind of a no-brainer.
Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Wakeham. Don't go anywhere. I'm going to use you here in a minute. Ms. Legault.
Item R2 is the report from Facilities and Transit on the 2021 draft budget for Function 107, Conventional and Custom Transit.
You're on again, Mr. Wakeham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, another positive news to start the day here because it's virtually similar. The Function 107, this is the conventional and handy dart or custom service transit service. So it's laid out, the report is laid out very similar with similar results, incurring significant tax increase in the draft budget of $261,000 or 9.6%. And the tax reduction options that were presented in the report, again, unfortunately, are not valid with the restart funding. Again, even though I have not had a chance to review that AOA in fine detail, the total funding I can tell you is very similar for the conventional and handy dart. It's a little over $604,000 over 2 years, so that's about $302,000 per year, almost the same as the commuter. And again, with the funding retro to April of 2020 of the current year, I'm expecting that for 2020 we should be in a pretty good surplus situation, which again was not what I was expecting in light of prior to this announcement. So regarding the 2021 budget, in the report, there's 2 adjustments that are noted, which already will bring the tax amount down. One was the board already approved the deferral of the custom service out a year, so that will lower taxes by $15,500. And the adjustment that staff are recommending the revenue projections be increased by $25,000. They were the ridership and revenue has improved a little bit in the last couple of months, so we were already sitting at a little over $40,000 improvement from the existing draft budget. But along with the restart funding and the draft tax of $261, let's say less $40,000. Again, staff are feeling that we're going to come down to 0. We might even be in below 0, which would be really good news in that situation. So again, same situation with the good news. I just don't think it would be wise really for the committee to discuss further any non-service or I'll take that back. The committee is just, I guess I'm just asking if the committee, if they'd like to discuss any non-service or fare change items. So again, really the only items that are left there is the deferral of the staff position, or we can wait until January again, which I suspect that's what the committee will want to do, because the two functions go hand in hand. It's tied to the same funding agreement. So I turn it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. I have a speakers list of Director Stone, Kuhn, and Wilson. Anyone else while I'm looking? Let's see, so Director Stone, please.
Yeah, if the directors want to talk about either delaying the service or expansion or the position, I'm open to that. But I would also support the referral in whole to the January 13th. I'm seeing nods, so I'll actually make the motion to refer this to the January 13th corporate services meeting.
Been moved and seconded. Do I need to go through my list if it has been referred, or are you okay calling the question? All those in favor of referral? Opposed, if any? That motion carries. And again, thank you, Mr. Wakeham.
Thank you.
Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item R3, report from Facilities and Transit regarding the CVRD Administration Office HVAC replacement project. And the recommendation proposed to go to this evening's board meeting, that the supplemental request for Function 200 Administration Office HVAC project be approved. 2, that staff be authorized to proceed with the Function 200 Administration Office HVAC project prior to adoption of the 2021 budget. And 3, that a grant application to the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program COVID-19 Resilience Infrastructure Stream for 100% of the estimated project costs that can be completed in 2021 for the Function 200 Administration Office HVAC project be approved.
Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I've looked through this. Basically, I'm recommending that we approve this this function.
So you're making that motion? Do we have a seconder on the motion? Seconded by Director Acton. Any further discussion? Director Morrison.
Through you to staff, just clarification that this isn't proceeding without a successful grant application, correct?
Mr. Chair, through to Mr. Morrison. No, that is not correct. So this is a little bit of a complex situation here, but again, it's great news. This is all tied to a new grant opportunity that we're hoping that we get successful in, but it's very time sensitive. The intent of the 3 recommendations are: 1 is to support the project, number 1, and then 2 is that we would need approval from the board that we can start with this project prior to the budget being adopted, because we'd have to get an RFP out in early January in order to get this done. The grant, and the third one is we need, it's very time sensitive to get our application into the grant, for the grant as well. So the current plan, just a little bit of background here, the current plan was to do this over 2 years, a 2-phase approach, a phase approach of doing approximately half in 2021 and the other half in 2022. When we looked at the grant situation, which is 100% funding if we're successful, and again, I do want to thank our team, Rob Williams and Austin Tarek, who've been helping me on this project, and I believe they're on the call as well. And we're working with Avalon Engineering to get the RFP documents ready to go out. The intent would be we'd move ahead with this, even without funding. The funding allows us to do both in 1 year, but the supplemental has phase 1 as going forward as the original plan, we do it only 1 year. So what really is undecided yet is we need a bit more time to work with our engineer to ensure, are we able to hold off issuing the RFP until we hear back, are we successful with the grant? That is the perfect world if we can wait. And Rob Williams and I believe we're going to hear back on this grant situation very quickly. It shouldn't take the 3 or 4 months like sometimes we do, because all the projects have to be completed by the end of 2021. So I think they're going to be reviewing these on a rolling situation. As soon as you can get your applications in, you're going to hear back whether it's a yes or no. We are hoping that we can if the board approves this tonight, that we can get our application in within a week, hopefully hear back in January. If we find out by January we're going to be we'll have an answer back, we will hold off with the RFP. If for some reason the response takes longer and we're not going to hear back until late February, March, we're going to have to issue the RFP and this is where we still need to work out the details. There'll likely be a phase 1 and phase 2, and somewhere we'll have to put in there the caveat that phase 2 is going to be conditional on the grant. So the RFP goes out, and as the supplemental report shows, the costs for phase 1, approximately 1.4 million, which would be short-term borrowed for the most part. That's what we would be suggesting. So does that answer your question, Mr. Morrison?
Follow up, Director Morrison?
In part, Mr. Wakeham, so I think I read this report on Sunday, so that was 3 days ago, and there's been a lot go through my eyes in the last couple of days here. So this is a project that I think falls into the nice to have category, especially given the pressures of our budget and COVID and the likes. And I read all of the benefits, the GHG reductions, all of that information contained in the report. But if we don't get the grant, this is going to be paid for by taxpayer dollars ultimately. And I know that there's cost savings and hydro savings and reduction in natural gas and all of that. But it kind of boils down to a bit of a comfort issue at the Ingram Street offices for, and yes, there's the savings. So this would be one of those projects that if we weren't to get grant funding, I'm not sure that proceeding in 2021 is the right move to make. So I just put that out there for consideration that if we need to approve this today in order for all the dominoes to line up to get the grant, then let's do that. But I'd like a second look if it seems like we're unsuccessful or if we find out we're unsuccessful in the grant. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Director Stone, Director Coon, Director Marsh, and Director Acton.
Thank you.
Stone.
Yeah, thank you. And I know we're all well aware of the time pressure. You find out about a grant program, so you got 3.5 weeks to get it in, and then you got about a year to finish it after that. So like Director Morrison said, though, I know that we had planned on doing phase 1, I believe, in 2021, but that was well before we understood the impacts of COVID or gave direction around this budget. If we were unsuccessful in the grant, what would be the requisition impacts for next year?
Mr. Chair, through to Mr. Stone, on the supplemental item, remember that this function is an allocation. It is not a direct tax increase. It gets allocated out to various functions. But if we did it as just phase 1, so if we weren't successful in the grant and we only do phase 1 in 2021, we are looking at an internal allocation cost of $116,000. And that is the cost of short-term borrowing on approximately $1.3 million, and we would be using a transfer from capital reserves of $153,000. So the direct impact is $116,000. I know Talitha from Finance is also on the call. If that is incorrect, please advise, but that's what I'm reading off of our supplementals. And
no, I saw that as well, but it was just trying to figure out what the actual tax impact would be if we were unsuccessful, right? So I appreciate that we may not know that for sure, but that was my question. Thank you.
Okay, going to Director Kuhn next.
Yes, I wonder how urgent is this work that has to be done? Could we push it off for a year? Could we even push it off for 2 years? Because I see 2 years in 2023, the function 200, there will be a decrease of 160,000, which would then be basically offsetting the additional costs that arise out of phase 1. I know it should be done, and I know it might be beneficial for CO2 emissions and all this kind of thing, or greenhouse gas emissions. But we are in a different situation now with COVID, and I think we should be very mindful of trying to push through projects that will increase taxation, and with the aim of having, let's say, more comfort at the office of the CVRD. Well, thinking about how our taxpayers work, and many of them work in premises that I'm quite sure are less taken care of than our CVRD offices. So I would find it hard to justify this step at this stage, considering that so many people are out of work or on short work orders, and I would be much in favor if there's no hope of getting the grant of pushing this project off. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Kuhn. We had a little bit of problem with your audio there, so if you want to speak next time, maybe mute your video, and that will help with the bandwidth. Director, or I almost demoted you, Mr. Wakeham.
That's okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to Director Kuhn. Yeah, it's a very valid question, and I expected that question to come up in light of the COVID situation. I guess I can tell you this, three things. The design phase is done. We've already worked with the engineer. He has designed, matter of fact, we asked him to design the whole project. Then we asked him to design it in 2 phases. Then now we've asked him to design it back in 1 project. And so that work is done where we'll be able to submit the RFP early in January. In terms of, does it absolutely have to be done? The answer to that is no. We can push this off, but every time you push it off, bear in mind there are consequences with that. There are consequences that the existing system we have, we cannot get refrigerant for the heat pumps that we have. When they go down, we either can't replace them or we replace them with a different heat pump, which means you're going to have, there's 52 heat pumps in the building. You're going to have a mix of different heat pumps, which is not good working with the controls. So I think you mentioned the word comfort, whether it's a comfort or inconvenience, those will be getting worse. I know one of the staff on the call today, Talitha, she knows her office has been nothing but problems because we're really challenged in certain areas of the building to improve the comfort level. I think what I'm actually hearing you, I'm sorry, I'll back up. And what we're advised also by the engineer, if you push it off and dealing with Advocates, which is an accounting surveyor, they gave us a Class A estimate. They're still predicting the cost to rise. With COVID, the costs are going up. We're starting to see costs go up for large, these type of construction projects. So I don't know what that's going to mean in a couple of years. But I could throw this out. I think what I'm hearing Director Kuhn say is that he would be supportive if it was funded by grants. So that could be a condition if you chose to say you can only do the work once you hear if the grants are successful. What I think, and that is your choice, if you did that, that means we're going to have to hold off. Like, there's 2 options. We're going to have to hold off putting the RFP out until likely Marchish, which I'm not sure if there's going to be enough time to, so if we're successful, I don't know if there, I highly believe we're not going to have enough time to finish it all in 1 year. Number 2, though, is we could say, if you said only conditional on getting a portion of, or the grant, we would only do that work. So we may end up only doing phase 1 as an example, which we can wait till March to do, or phase 2. I'd have to talk to the consultant which way he'd like to do it. But I guess what we're ultimately trying to say, you have an opportunity here to get 100% of this funded, and we're going to keep our fingers crossed that we do receive a successful response back. So that, I suppose, could be an option you might want to consider.
Okay, thank you. I have Director Marsh, Acton, and then Sebring.
Thank you very much. I read very carefully attachment B, I think it is, about the problems, and I forget what it is, that if it needs repairing, it's about 40% of the cost of replacement. And there's just so many reasons that I feel that we should go ahead. And I'm actually pretty confident that we will get the money. But if we don't get the money, then we just do phase 1. And I agree with Mr. Wakeham. It has to be done. It's 17 plus years old for heat pump. And, you know, unless commercial heat pumps have a way larger life than residential, you know, it seems like it's inevitable that any the other thing is Freon is, I'm embarrassed to say we still have Freon in something. And the last thing I would say is I'm looking to replace my doors. And last year they were $1,000, and this year they're $2,000. So I just think it's the responsible thing to do is to look after the equipment. And I really do feel very confident that we will get the grant. And I think that, you know, if we don't at least go for it, There'll be a considerable number of people who will go, you had a chance to get 100% grant and you didn't even try. And now 2 years later, it's costing us this much more. I don't think I want that board to wear that. So to me, when things are at that stage that I see in this report, although Mr. Wakeham, you're not really bringing those things out, for me, I think it's that we should go ahead.
Thank you, Director Marsh. I have Director, would you like to respond, Mr. Wakeham, please?
If I may, Mr. Chair, through to Director Marsh, one other really important thing to keep in mind is the whole intent of our capital asset management plan is to follow that plan. And that plan is telling us those heat pumps should have been replaced. That the phase 2 items, which are the large pieces of equipment on the roof, the cooling tower, the makeup air handling units, those type of items, those were to be replaced in the next couple of years. And so like in the next 1 to 3 years. So it was a prime opportunity to put the two together. So it's a little bit further to Director Coombs' point when you say, does it have to be done? You can go through that with any project. That's the whole idea why we spent, I think Brian will tell us that we've been about 3 years on our capital asset management plan. And that's why we did the plan, so that we follow it as best as we can and change the pieces of equipment that need changing. That's just something to keep in the back of your mind.
Great, thank you very much.
Great. And that just, if I may, Mr. Chair. Yeah, that just confirms my decision even further. North Cowichan, I guess it's a good 12 years ago, spent several years of very low increases, and then finally it caught up to them. And they were almost 13%, which is a lot for one municipality to do. And I just think it's a responsible thing to do, and let's be positive and hope that we'll get at least partial, if not 100%, to pay for the project. Because if I understand correctly, this project is likely not going to be, this money is not going to be offered 2 or 3 years down the road. And we're still going to have to replace these assets. So why would we not? I just, this makes no sense to me that we wouldn't.
Thank you. Director Acton is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would support waiting for a grant opportunity. That's not going to be our only grant opportunity. They're going to just keep coming. I think we have a big responsibility to the families of the region. This is in my mind, a nice to have. Out of all the functions that we're looking at today, there's some on my mind that I would like to see increased. This is not necessarily that one. And at this point, it's going to be, we don't even know what the residual effects. Yes, COVID's probably going to end shortly this year, but we just don't know what the residual effects are going to be. And we don't even actually probably have a clear idea of what's our work life going to look like moving into the future. So I don't think this is a decision we need to make, or at least a requisition. We also do not have the numbers of our reserves coming forward. What's been spent this year, and because a lot of functions have been under budget because of COVID. So staff could come back in June and change the budget and bring some operating reserves. So I think it would be our responsibility to support the motion, or if there is a motion on the table yet. I'm sorry, I'm uncertain, but I would like to just go for the grant. And if we're not successful, then we'll look at other options in the future.
There is a motion on the floor, but I have another speaker, Director Sebring.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just to be clear, the motion on the floor is the one that was in the staff report?
That is correct.
All right. I have a question for Mr. Wakeham, and then perhaps an amendment to the motion if the board will allow me. The question for Mr. Wakeham really, and I know you can't answer it, but I'm going to ask it anyway. How confident are we that we're going to get this grant? Because we're hearing a lot of this for a lot of people hinges on the grant funding. What's our expectation here?
Mr. Chair, through to Mr. Sebring, that's a tough question. I can tell you that Rob Williams, who is our capital projects coordinator Jeff has been in touch with the program, and he feels pretty confident. Because, and I'll tell you why. Because it's what Director Stone indicated. We're ready. We have our energy report done. We have our drawings done. We are ready to go to RFP. There's going to be a lot of other regions that are not going to be ready in time to get this work done in a year. That to do that amount of work in a year is tight, and so I'm confident that we have all our ducks in a row and should have a good, successful application put in, because it meets again all the reducing greenhouse gas and following a capital asset management plan, all those positive things. So I'm pretty confident. I can't give you a percentage number, but I think we'll hear back I'm hoping by the end of January.
Thank you. My amendment, and I don't know whether it'll fly, and I'm not sure where to insert it, but it would be in bullet 2 of the recommended resolution, and the amendment would add the words subject to a successful grant application, so that under bullet 2 of the recommended resolution, the amendment would be that that subject to a successful grant application, staff be authorized to proceed with function 200, etc. If I can get a seconder for that, I'd like to speak to it. I have several.
Yeah, I do have a seconder. I just want to reach out to Ms. Legault and make sure that's a friendly amendment and doesn't change the intent of the original one.
I think that's allowable.
Okay,
Thank you, Ms.
and I
Legault.
do have a seconder, so I'll let you speak to that.
No, I mean, it's to me, it's pretty fundamental and pretty simple. You know, what we've heard here is that, yes, there's a potential cost down the line if we don't get the grant, we have to fund it ourselves. But, you know, in my considered opinion, I agree with some of the others who said this is one of those nice to haves. And if we can get a nice to have with 100% grant funding, awesome. But if we can't, then it's a nice to have, and I'm not prepared to increase the requisition to do that. So that's why I'm thinking subject to successful grant application. And based on what we hear from staff, we're probably going to get it anyway. So this is just that extra little safeguard. And then, you know, if we don't get the grant, we'll know by the end of January, and then perhaps we can come back and revisit this again before we finalize the budget. That's all. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. I have Director Morrison, Director Wilson. Is that a hand up, Director Marsh? Okay. So Director Morrison, Wilson, then Marsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think staff have made a pretty compelling argument. I've sort of come around to accept the notion that this is sort of fallen out of the nice to have category and something that we must do. It's one of those things where you know, to keep spending a whole bunch of money on and I know this building isn't a clunker, but the borrowing costs right now are at historic lows, and they've put forward what seems to be a very reasonable, well thought out plan. And well, you know, I initially came into this thinking that we shouldn't proceed unless the grant is acquired. I think that staff have put forward a very thoughtful and good argument for this project proceeding. So I'm not going to support the amendment, and I will support the motion as originally presented. And just to finish, Director Acton said something that I'm contemplating for this whole day of budget discussions. We need to be very strategic and tactical in some of the decisions that we make today. And this is one of the first that I think is going to be important to consider as we move forward. And again, I think staff have done a really good job of presenting the case. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Morrison. Moving to Director Wilson next.
Scratch me, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Director Marsh.
Yeah, essentially, I would say in my own way the same thing that Director Morrison just said. It's going to have to be done. It could fail this winter. And I understood Mr. Wakeham. I'd just like to get clarification that he said the only way we could meet the condition of having it done by the end of 2021 is if they went out to RFP right early in January. So could you clarify that for me, please, Mr. Wakeham?
Sure, Mr. Chair, through to Director Marsh. So with that, suggested amendment. I'm going to have to spend some time with procurement because I see one of two ways how to proceed. One is that we hold off the whole RFP until we hear back. And if we hear back by the end of January, that would be fine. If for some reason, though, we don't anticipate we're going to hear back until, let's say, late February, we're likely going to be too late. Because this is the lead time for this equipment is huge. It's 16 to 18 weeks. Just to order a lot of this equipment is not local. So I'm thinking that an option could be if we put an RFP out anyway prior to hearing back. So let's just say we put it out on January the 10th. It would have to say in the RFP, subject to financing, subject to the CVRD receiving grant approval, which does not put us in a good situation, because if you're a construction company and you're going to go through a ton of work to submit your submission, and there's the caveat there that, well, this is all dependent on grants, we might not get a lot of competitive bids. They may hold off and say it's not worth their 10 or 20 or 30 grand or whatever it takes for them and time and effort to put the bids in. So that is the negative of holding or putting that caveat, if you will, in an RFP. It is still allowed and it does happen, but sometimes you run the risk that you're either going to get really high rated, how would I say this to you, really very high costs because they don't want to go through it, or you might just reduce the amount of people. So yes, it can still work, but I have to figure out which one of those two is the best advantageous way to do it.
So, well, I'd just like to say I don't support the amendment. I think it's important to, with or without the grant, to get started, but I actually have very high confidence that if staff have been talking to the grant and feel very confident that I think we'll get the grant. And I think that if we put it off, all the things that Mr. Wakeham said are likely to happen, and even more. And we have precedent for this. We have when North Cowichan built the pool, the price went up something like 40% from the beginning because of council digging in heels, etc. So I don't support the amendment.
Thank you. I have Director Yanni DiNardo next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to say that I do not support this amendment, and we have been told about the HVAC system from a while ago, and we understood. And even if you're working in your own home, these things, this is why we had the asset management. We're moving ahead. This is a good report from staff, and I do not support this amendment. I support the original resolution. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further speakers? Ms. Legault, should I call a question on the amendment first?
Please call a question on the amendment.
So I will call the question on the amendment to add subject to successful grant receipt. All those in favor of the amendment? Those opposed? Keep your hands up, please. Okay, that fails. So back to the original motion in the report. That has been moved and duly seconded. Are you ready for the question on that? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? I see Director Sebring, Director Acton, and Director Kuhn opposed. That motion carries. Thank you very much. Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On to item R4, report from Finance on regional functions 2021 draft budgets. And the recommendation is to approve the 2021 draft budgets for functions 100, 109, 121, 123, 283, 285, and 400.
Director Stone.
I was just prepared to move the resolution.
I have a mover and a seconder. Discussion? Director Morrison.
Thank you. If we could debate separately 3, 4, and 7, please.
Okay, I've got those marked down. I have Director Marsh.
It could have just been my ears, but I thought that Ms. Legault jumped from something like 121 to 283. Am I wrong?
It's the way it's outlined in the report.
Oh, okay. I'm not looking at the same report then, because mine have them all there. But yeah, I'm happy to support pulling whatever anyone needs to talk more about.
Okay, I currently have 3, 4, and 7. Bullet 3, 4, and 7. Is there any further bullets you'd like pulled? Okay. So, shall we approve or pull and discuss first?
Sorry, is that to me, Director McGonigal? Sorry, you're cutting out, so I wasn't able to hear you. Okay, so if we're able, Ms. Legault, do we need a motion to pull 3, 4, and 7 as the block? Okay, so are we able to just call the question on the other items?
If that's the will of the committee, certainly.
Thank you. Okay, that's what I'd recommend, that we call the other items and then we do 3, 4, and 7.
So let's call a vote for the remaining items, excluding 3, 4, and 7. I have a mover and a seconder. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Let's move to number 3.
Excuse me, Chair McGonigal. To me, you sound like you're in an aquarium. I don't know if others feel that way, but I wonder, even though your smile is so delightful, if maybe it would be helpful if you turned off your video.
I can try that if it helps. Or am I still underwater?
No, you sound fantastic.
Well, I don't
and your
look
smile is embedded in our memories.
Okay, so let's move to number 3 that's been pulled first of all. Do we need that read out? Director Morrison, you wanted this pulled. Would you like to speak to it?
Yeah, and I would even move the resolution, but I would just like to ask a question of staff.
Okay, so you're moving it. Are
Sure.
you seconded, Director Yanni DiNardo? Moved and seconded? Okay, and your question, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to if Mr. O'Riordan is on the line or his manager. I was in a meeting the other day with some of my compatriots and representatives of the town of Lake Cowichan and our tourism folks in the western part of the Cowichan Valley, and there's some increasing concerns about our attention being paid to the Cowichan Lake area as far as some of the work that's being done. I know that we've had some great successes in some of the other areas, but if I could perhaps just ask if staff have any initiatives or work planned to enhance some of the questions and issues and strengths that the Cowichan Lake area has, and what they've got in their work plan for the year ahead.
Jesse, you're wondering what activities we're looking to do to support the environment.
I think we're having problems with the audio
can't
as
hear him.
well.
Is that better?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So through the chair to Director Morrison, are you looking to understand what activities we're looking to undertake to support the economy in Lake Cowichan?
Generally, yes.
Okay, I think that might require EDC to come back with a report and update on the activities that we're undertaking. We do have a work plan laid out for 2021, which would include support for all communities within the region. And yeah, I'm not prepared to go into all the details of that at this time. If it was possible to report back with some details. But Economic Development Cowichan does have a number of initiatives under plan for supporting the whole region's economic development for 2021.
Thank you.
Just a follow up. Thank you for that. I look forward to seeing you in the new year then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Stone?
Yeah, having had some of those successes in the region working with Economic Development Cowichan, I think there's a good opportunity for the municipality of Lake Cowichan, through you, Mr. Chair, to initiate some of that work. Director Morrison and I may be aware of other opportunities for funding and resources coming in the new year that will allow us to provide additional supports to community-based economic development initiatives. And I would contend that, like was done in the municipality with Ladysmith, we formed a partnership in the area, a regional partnership, and brought together the business organizations, put together some applications, and then had support from Mr. O'Riordan and Ms. Melmock before him to get those initiatives off the ground. So hopefully in the new year, we'll see some additional funding opportunities for the resources required, such as staffing and small grant opportunities that can fund work even beyond the scope and the budget as presented. So I'm happy to support the budget, but we'll also support those areas that wish to take that initiative on economic development and recovery in the new year.
Thank you, Director Stone. I have Director Smith and then Director Kuhn.
Yes, both area G and H, we have minimal businesses and opportunities for the benefits of economic development. If you look at the budget, we've each probably over the last 5 years contributed over $125,000 into this function. And you know, we're looking for benefits for the small communities also with limited businesses. And this would be something that we would like to see in the work plan also. Thank you.
Thank you. I've added Director Marsh, but I have Director Kuhn next.
Mr. Chairman, would you allow me to ask a question about Function 100? I know it's been passed and I forgot to ask a question that I had. Could I still ask that question?
No, I'm a pretty easygoing guy, Director Kuhn, and I see
so
no problem with that.
The question I have is, I noticed there's an item in there on general government, $900,000 for furniture, and I'm just wondering what that is all about.
Anyone willing to take that on?
Mr. Chair, that's Talitha.
Thank you.
That $900,000 is the RMS, the records management software purchase, which was approved in the budget last year.
Okay, Director Kuhn, that answers? Great. I have Director Marsh next.
Thank you. I really heard Director Smith, and I know there's many areas of North Cowichan that are quite rural, and so it's a little bit different in the municipality, obviously, but I would just contend that economic development, while it may not bring in taxes to the degree it does to other areas in G and H, it certainly does provide jobs for the people who live in G and H, which helps them pay for their homes and their food and their vehicles and their lifestyle. So I do support number 3.
Great. Any further speakers on bullet number 3? Seeing none, I'll call the question on approving bullet number 3. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Don't see any opposed. That carries. Number 4 was also pulled. Director Morrison, that's one you want to pull. Would you like to speak to that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will. I'll move the item, and if there's a seconder, I'll speak to it.
I do have a seconder, so please carry on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, there was a recent meeting of stakeholders and elected officials in regards to the provision of tourism services to the western region of the Cowichan Valley, and there's increasing weight being brought to bear on local taxpayers and the likes. I'm likely going to be needing to increase my electoral area grant and aid to support the tourism services in the Cowichan Lake area, and just remind folks that there's been some significant investments made in the past in other areas, and I think that not only the south end of the Cowichan Valley, but the west are going to need some perhaps capital dollars and supports for tourism, and we may be needing to look at whether or not the Tourism Association is able to enhance services, and maybe part of that may be at some point an increase to the allocation that we make to them. But this is just to let folks know, and let our Tourism Cowichan folks know that the West is needing a little bit more attention, and we'd like to also see the South have an opportunity to reestablish itself in the provision of tourism services. So with that, I will support the resolution. Thank you.
Director Stone.
I just lend my support to that, but also recognize that although when the town and the northern communities joined the regional tourism function, the local functions were collapsed. We've felt the need in the last 2 years to refund those because we felt we weren't getting enough of those marketing dollars toward the north as well. One of those projects I spoke of in the previous item was basically reestablishing Tourism Ladysmith. Now we're trying to work and build on the branding and the work of Tourism Cowichan, but it is noted that it's very centrally focused, and it would be nice to see them make a stronger effort. But I would say in that, I feel we've been getting more attention and support than the Western communities have.
Any further speakers? Call the question. All those in favor, vote for. Opposed, if any? That carries. And now to number 7, another one, Mr. Director Morrison.
Mr. Chair, given there might be some significant discussion of this item, I'm wondering if there might be a short break before we tackle this one.
I will gauge the interest of the directors for a 10-minute break. Okay, I'll see you back here at 11:25 precisely.
Camera's live.
Great, thank you. Welcome back, directors, and those watching so intently at home. We will resume with R4, and I will mute my video here. I seem to have a bandwidth problem, so I am here. Number 7 has been pulled. Did you wish to point of order, Director Wilson, or?
No, Mr. Chair, I would like to be put on the speakers list for this one, please.
Okay, I will just get this introduced. I believe Director Morrison pulled it, and then I will put you on the list.
Mr. Chair, are you wanting me to proceed?
Please, if you would.
Well, I'm actually not going to move any resolution at this point. I think that there's significant enough interest in not just the directors, but the community, and in hearing their elected officials discuss this. I've heard a lot of comments on either side, so I'll just yield at this point and ask that be put on the speakers list towards the end. Thank you.
Okay, I have Director Wilson, Director Stone. While I'm looking, can I see other hands? Director Marsh. Okay, let's start with Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, thank you to all those people who have written into this. I understand their passion, and I understand that they need to see something done on this. There are just as many I've seen for and against this particular function. I'd like to say that I am not opposed to parkland acquisition. Let's get that clear right from the very start. I do have concerns about other aspects of the parkland acquisition, but I'm not opposed to the actual acquisition itself. I'm going to hold this up here, and it's the 2020 Canadian Food Price Report that was delivered yesterday by Dalhousie, the University of Guelph, Saskatchewan, and UBC. And basically, it is predicting that next year food prices will go up by an overall food increase of 3 to 5% for 2021. This would mean something in the region of $700 per family of 4 just on groceries. And we all understand that these are tough economic times, and there's a lot of people who are struggling with the loss of work hours and income. And the more taxes we increase, the more rents will increase, and the more renovictions will increase. This is going to make it much more difficult for affordability. This has already been recognized by both the federal and the provincial governments, with rental assistance going on and the latest BC tax-free allowances for those families and individuals that up to $1,000. So one of the problems with taxation is that once it exceeds what I would like to term the level of burdensome, it's no longer a tax. It becomes a penalty. And that is something that we as community leaders cannot condone, and we cannot allow at this time. We cannot penalize the people who are living in our communities by increasing taxes. I'm not saying by any means that we end parkland acquisition. What I'm saying is that at this time, this is not a good thing to be looking at increasing. We need to be consolidating what we've got until these tough times are over. And right now is not the time to be looking at huge increases in this particular one. I am therefore in support of the draft function 4, function 285 as presented at this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have Director Stone, Marsh, Smith, Morrison. Any further hands while I'm looking? Director Stone.
Thank you. And it was recognized and somewhat misunderstood, I think, in some of the feedback that we've received, that the reduction in the 2019 year was somewhat, restored last year with an additional 100,000 being per year put back into the function. And my understanding of that discussion, or my perspective on it rather, would be that we have a path forward to continue to restore the funding to that function. However, much like Director Wilson had said, I'm very mindful of the financial pressures, and also looking forward rather, but also looking backward in the compounding increases that have been delivered to CVRD residents over the last 6 years since I've been on the board. You know, in our area, it's almost 50% over that time increase. So I am very supportive of regional parkland acquisition. I'm very supportive of over time restoring that funding. And to be fair, I would be supportive of a minor or a modest increase in 2021, provided that things like the transit funding and stuff, which will mitigate some of the proposed increases earlier, come forward and provide us that relief. But I couldn't support restoring the maximum level of funding. I think that would be irresponsible this year. However, it would be worth having a discussion about how we move forward over the next 5 or so years and look to restore that funding and build up those reserves for those opportunities to purchase lands that would be appropriate. So I'll leave the discussion to the other members of the board, but I would either be willing to support the motion or the resolution recommendation here of no increase, or a modest increase on a path to returning to a higher level of funding over the next few years.
Thank you, Director Stone. I have Director Marsh next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to read a little bit from the inaugural, and I think the only, unless someone can correct me, State of the Environment report that the former Environment Commission commissioned, and Director Giles was the chair of the board of directors. So I'm going to read a little bit from her introduction. I'm going to try and shorten it. So I'm going to read 2 paragraphs. The commission contracted an experienced scientific team to develop sets of measurable indicators for a variety of environmental values.
Excuse me, is this a point of order? Could you share this with us all before you read it? Or are you're introducing new information?
Actually, I don't know. Is it a point of order, Ms. Legault? It's a CVRD document that we should all have and should all have read. So I'll have to leave that to Ms. Legault.
I'm actually going to defer that to the chair.
I think we know where your intentions are, Director Marsh, in pointing out the impacts of parkland acquisitions on climate change. So if that will suffice, without reading the full paragraph or 2, I think we do have that document at our disposal should we wish to investigate. Is that suffice, Director Acton?
Well, I just thought if there's new information being shared, if it would be a common courtesy to just share it with us, perhaps, in advance, couple minutes in advance or something, so that we have it in front of us. And somebody's inaugural speech from 10 years ago or whenever that was is not really something that I've necessarily read. So that's a big assumption.
Okay, well then.
And I understand the importance of climate change and this parkland acquisition, but adding more information to this discussion, I think, is problematic.
Thank you. So do you have a question or a comment, a direct one, Director Marsh? I don't want to be terse without reading the 2 paragraphs.
Well, no, I would like to read the 2 paragraphs, and I think that there'll be quite a bit of pushback if the board decides they do not want, because they haven't maybe read it or not read it, or they don't want it read. But if you tell me I can't read it, I won't read it. So you tell me, and then I'll move to another.
I think the will of the directors, if I'm not mistaken, is to just carry on without the verbiage of those 2 paragraphs. I can see nodding of heads or shaking of heads, whatever you wish. I see 1 no and 2 no's, bunch of yeses. So let's forego the reading of the 2 paragraphs. If you wish to send that out by email to the board later, please do, and it will reaffirm your comments, I'm sure.
Okay, well then I'll go to my comments because Chair Giles mentioned in one of those paragraphs that what the scientists discovered was very sobering. And so the pressures at that time have only the pressures on the land base have only increased since 2007 when that, I don't know why my battery's going low. When that report came out, and it talks a lot about basically, okay, well, yeah, it's quite interesting. Under the Act, I have 10 minutes to speak, and I should be allowed to speak on what I want to, but I accept the chair.
You're more than welcome to challenge the chair if you wish. Well, that is your prerogative, and I would be open to that if you so desire.
Well, I do challenge you because this is what I prepared, and I think that...
Fellow directors, shall the chair be challenged? And shall Director Marsh be allowed to read the 2 paragraphs as she stated?
I think we've spent more time on this than probably reading out the 2 paragraphs would have taken.
And I was just gauging the interest from fellow directors. So again, if you want to continue.
We're here to listen to different perspectives. And I believe that we listen to things all the time that we perhaps aren't that, not interested in hearing necessarily, but there are, times that people do go on in conversation and we allow that to happen quite frequently. So I don't know why there are times that we can't do that.
Mr. Chair, Director Wilson here.
Yes, sir.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but did Director Marsh just say that she has 10 minutes to speak? If that's the case, then we're going to be here all day.
Okay, I don't want to get into a battle here, ladies and gentlemen. I just want to continue on as best we can and as productive as we can on a very long day.
Continue on then.
So if you want, Director Marsh, please carry on.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. The chair has been the chair's ruling has been challenged. I believe there's a process to go through now. And I think that involves a vote, but I would defer to our corporate officer to let us know what the process is now with respect to the challenge to the chair's ruling.
I believe that is the case. It should go to a vote. And she's nodding her head. Yep, carry on.
The appropriate question then is, shall the chair's ruling be sustained? I believe that's the question that needs to be asked, and we vote on that.
So noted. Shall the chair's decision be sustained? All those in favor? Opposed? Carry on, Director Marsh.
I think she needs to plug in her computer.
Chair McGonigal?
Yes, I hear you.
It's plugged in, but it's not charging. So I don't know if you're asking me to read or just to talk.
No, please carry on. As you wish.
Okay. So as I said, they contracted an experienced scientific team to look at a variety of environmental values. The task was both to use both historic and current data to analyze current conditions and emergent trends, and to suggest what would be needed in the future to fill in information gaps that they discovered. This report was done in 2007, by the way. Then she goes on to say in the second paragraph, their report is a sobering one. The team examined the status of water, air, fish, agricultural land, biodiversity, population and growth, the implications of climate change, and the management of waste. The story that emerges is that the wonderful environment that has attracted so many of us to the Cowichan region is under stress, and most trends are negative. Although
Mr. Chair, we've probably lost Director Marsh if her battery was that low.
I think we have, and I apologize for that. If you do hear us, Director Marsh, please send that to the directors so we can at least know what you were speaking of. I have Director Smith next, and if Director Marsh does come back on, I'll go back to her.
Thank you. I think that we all agree that parkland acquisition is very important. I think that in 2008, there was no thought of 2020 and 2021 being in a pandemic and a financial situation that the majority of our taxpayers find themselves in. I know that Director Wilson spoke of the increase in food costs for next year. I think that most of us have found as we've gone to the grocery store in 2020 that there's been a large increase in the cost of our food. So what I'd like to say is that possibly we should be looking at other alternate options for trying to fund this function, looking for people who are doing their estate planning, that they have an opportunity to donate to this function for a ability for the Cowichan Valley to do more parkland, and also the Land Conservancy. I just like to point out that Area G Saltaire is looking at approximately $440 per parcel increase to fund a mandated under the province of BC island health filtration system. And that's under the Local Government Act, something that we are mandated as a board as our duties, and that looking at parkland acquisition at this time is nice, but I will not be able to support any increase at this time for this year. I think in the future, this is an opportunity for us to move forward in the future. At this time, I would not be able to support any increases. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Director Morrison, Stone, Wilson, and Salmon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got a lot to say, but I'll reserve my remarks to a couple of things. So I was one of those people that went to the open houses that were held in various communities throughout the region, and they were incredibly well attended. This is probably my first exposure to democracy. I wish I wasn't so busy reading agendas yesterday to follow up on some of the additional emails that were going around where we indicated what some of the purchases that were made and where they were and how much was spent. There's an unfulfilled list of properties that the community wanted us to go out and acquire that I don't know that we're all aware of. This was a very highly supported initiative. And when it came in a couple of years after it was first started, there were attempts to use this, and I'm going to call it a budgetary buffer And there were attempts by directors to basically adjust the requisition amount in this to make the rest of the budget look better. And it was never intended to be a budgetary buffer. The expectations of people that I spoke to at that time and the people that wrote in at that time was, you just went to the public and asked us what we should be contributing, and the amount was $5 100,000. So I bring that up because we've done other things like this before. And I just bring you to the hospital district where we contributed $1 million. It started with $1 million and added $1 million, and we kept going. And there was no cessation in that. And we're at that $10 million amount. Now, I'm not equating the down payment for a hospital to the regional parkland acquisition specifically, but there are some people in our community that think that it's just as important. So with that, I'll end my remarks there and say that I have come to this meeting today with an open mind, not to say that we should go to the full amount or that we should be reducing it, but I think that, look, I've got right now up on the screen the 5-year plan. And the 5-year plan shows a $250,000 requisition this year. And next year, it says $853,000. Now, I don't know that circumstances are going to change that dramatically, that we'll be able to go to that $853,000. But I think as leaders in our community and reflecting some of what we've heard from input, we should be trying to restore funding to a level that is somewhat akin to what the public voted for 12 years ago. So I'm open to hearing what others have to say, and I think we should be looking at a movement towards getting back to a number that the public is accustomed to. And it may not be 250, it may not be 500, but I think there's a number higher than what we've got that would do a lot to show the leadership that the community expects of us. Thank you.
Thank you. I have added Director Staples and Kuhn to my list and Director Nicholson. So I'll go to Director Stone first, please.
Sorry, I was just trying to do some tech support there. Actually, what I needed to say has been said, so I'll just leave it to the other directors to discuss. Did we now lose Mr. Chair?
Director Wilson, you're next. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excuse me. One of the things that hasn't been, we're talking about history and historical things which are going on here, and I'm a great believer in learning from history, but at this particular point, that was then. This is now. We're in the middle of a pandemic and everybody is suffering badly. I'm not going to labor that point. We have 1,233.8 hectares, which is 3,048 acres of total parklands, which are owned or managed by the CVRD. And one of the points that Director Sebring brought up, and I'm quite prepared to support that, is for a modest amount of increase in the requisition. And I'm happy with that. I'm quite happy to go from 250,000 to 300,000 this year, and let's build it back up slowly. I've never ever said that we should stop it. We need to build this back up slowly so that we get back to a level. Now, I'm not sure about the 5-year report. I haven't seen that one, but we certainly can't go to 850,000 next year. Just as an example, one of the things that people tend to forget is if we buy anything, and this applies to houses, cars, whatever, that cost doesn't end there. There are maintenance costs. There are all sorts of things that go in on top. So whenever we buy more parkland, it's not just a question of, oh, that's it, because it's not. Let me give you an example here. The Area C Cobble Hill has 20 parks with a total of 73.95 acres. The requisition for Area C for parks is $283,752. Maintenance, that's all it is. works out at $3,837. Sorry, let me start again. $3,837 per acre per year, purely in maintenance. So yes, let's increase the parkland acquisition by a modest amount. I'm open to suggestions on that one, and I will support a modest increase. But think about what it costs to maintain these things. And let's think about what the additional costs are in obtaining more and more parkland. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Director Salmon, Staples, Kuhn, Nicholson, Sebring. Director Salmon, please.
Yeah, thank you. I also would support a small, but only a small increase. I think with COVID, that's what we're looking at this year, and the burden of COVID is not spread equally. So it's we don't all feel it, but certainly some people certainly do. A couple of just quick points. Are there alternative ways to support parkland acquisition? I was reading over the Regional Parks Master Plan, and I see it calls for creating a donation or endowment fund to support acquisitions. So I don't know if that was ever acted on, or whether we could look at that again, but it might be a good idea. And then secondly, I also noticed in the emails yesterday, we've got a large operating reserve, 1.2 million, and I'm wondering, maybe a question for finance, but is that also is that locked into operating, or can it be used if needed as a capital reserve?
Mr. Soldera?
Operating reserves can be used for either operating or capital expenses. The payment of debt, so principal and interest payments, are actually operating expenses, just so that the board is not confused. And the purchase of capital assets are considered capital expenses. But operating reserves can be used for either. I believe that this function is over its maximum operating reserve, so we would be transferring the amount over to the capital reserve at the end of the year.
Okay, thank you. That helps, because in total, then we've got over 2 million in the reserves when you add the operating and the current capital reserve. So that's also something for people to keep in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Salmon. I have Director Staples next.
Thank you. Yeah, I would just like to ask staff, has that endowment been set up? Or where are we with that?
Anyone wish to take that?
Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee.
Yes.
With regard to an endowment program or fund, a specific program similar to what the Metro Vancouver Regional District has through their Pacific Parklands Endowment Fund. No, there has not been any direction or action to date by the Cowichan Valley Regional District to establish and support an endowment fund. However, through direction of the committee and board, staff could certainly look into it. There definitely would be a need to find ways to resource and support that as well. However, the regional district does remain open to donations, and over the years, through the acquisition of regional parks, we have had, people recall, just over 2 years ago, working with Mosaic Forest Management, Sadu Regional Park was acquired as a donation out in the Upper Coquihalla. A number of years ago as well, a portion of the regional park land area acquired above Hart and Stocking Lake to start establishing that regional park also included a portion of the acquisition as a donation. So the balance was paid for, but a portion was contributed as a donation. So there are examples of what we've achieved to date, but in terms of a formal endowment program, no, not as of yet. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I just feel that I mean, I support a modest increase. I don't think, again, everyone has stated here how important this function is, and we all do recognize that. And again, speaking to COVID, that is one thing that people have really cherished in this region, is the ability to go into parks and access parks. I know in the city, we get feedback on parks consistently from people about the value that they add, and we hear the same thing from the regional district. and or from members throughout the district. So it would be good, however, to also, if we're not prepared to move any direction at this time around that in creating an official sort of endowment process, that when whatever decisions we make, that is also something that we remind, the community of, that we do have a contribution, the ability to take contributions of land, because that may be something that people don't necessarily know, and we have to keep reminding the community of the different ways that people can contribute. And so at this point in time, I would love us to come up with some sort of ability to increase the fund for this year, and then revisit this next year on how we want to, as Director Stone stated, come up with a 5-year plan of how we're going to get back up to the levels that we should be at.
Thank you very much. I see Director Marsh has rejoined us. Can you hear me, Director Marsh? Oh, she's getting technical support.
I'm here, but I'm getting technical support.
So would you wish that I come back to you when you conclude that? Okay. Director Kuhn, you're next.
I have a question. There is a loan outstanding from the Municipal Finance Authority, as far as I know. How much interest do we pay on that loan? What are the interest charges per year?
Ms. Soldera?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the total, sorry, I'm just looking it up right here. So the loan matures in 2023. The total principal and interest payments for it are $74,150. So just the interest itself is, computer is being a little slow today, please excuse me. The interest itself is $5,708 per year.
Could you tell me, I seem to remember that loan was taken out years ago, and there was quite a discussion about it, and I remember I voted against it at the time because the loan was taken out, from what I remember, as a precaution, so we would have enough cash available in case some big property came up, and so that we could purchase it right on the spot, because at that time we didn't have enough in reserve. Could you tell me how many years has that loan been outstanding, do you know?
So the only loan we currently have outstanding is a short-term debt. So that means the term of it is not longer than 5 years. It matures in 2023, which says to me that it was taken out in 2018.
Oh yeah, okay. And I'd have one more comment, and that is, when the function was set up, there was a maximum set, but it was up to the board to decide. The maximum was not set that we adhere to it no matter what. It all depended. It was at the it was a decision of the board to either go up to the maximum or not contribute at all, and that was taken for granted because economic circumstances could change. And now we have that change in economic circumstances. So to the people that insist that we go up to the maximum where we should buy as much parkland as possible, at what time would these people actually say, well, no, maybe we shouldn't, when there's a war? Or what would be required for that? We are in a tough circumstance right now economically, and I think we have every reason not to go up to the maximum, and I would be in favor of staying with the amount that was proposed. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Kuhn. I have Director Nicholson, Sebring, Morrison, Acton, and Stone. Director Nicholson.
Thank you. I'm challenged by this conversation. I'm not quite sure where to start, and I don't want to repeat some very good points that have been made by other people, but I probably will, so I apologize in advance. I don't think the timing on budget stuff is ever going to improve, quite frankly. I think it's very interesting that Director Wilson brought up the case of rising food prices. Rising food price, and this is not to say that COVID isn't an extremely important and huge deal for many people, and it has impacted us economically. But rising food prices are going to continue to rise primarily because of climate change. And I think that we need to get our heads around the fact that the pressure, the economic pressures on our citizens are just going to continue to go up, and they're going to go up faster and faster. So it was a mistake 2 years ago, as Director Morrison pointed out. It was a huge mistake 2 years ago to drop this down. And now we're saying that we have a real problem with COVID, so we couldn't possibly go back up. Well, you know, we made a mistake 2 years ago. I don't want us to make that mistake again today. This is an investment for the future. And if you want to protect our environment so we can still grow food, you need to have the buffer of a healthy ecosystem all around you. And I certainly agree that we will never be able to, fund enough protection, purchase of land sort of thing. And we need to look at other ways to encourage other people to do their part. But we really need to start to think strategically. And I appreciate Director Marsh's pointing out the environment report, because really these decisions ought to be based on science. And I find it increasingly challenged. I am increasingly challenged to kind of figure out where we should go without solid sort of technical scientific understanding of what we should be doing in this valley, what ecosystems are truly important to be paying attention to and protect. I'm an ecologist, I have a pretty good idea, but I'm not up to date, and I really think that we need to be more strategic. And I certainly don't want to see us not fund parkland acquisition until we've done that work. When we continue to fund things like, curling rings and, all those other things, which to me are frivolous, because if you don't have a healthy environment underneath you, all those other things don't matter. And on top of that, I really appreciated the letter that mentioned how important the environment is for our mental and physical health. We've seen that in spades with COVID. So I don't know why we're having this conversation. And I don't know why I didn't say more 2 years ago and last year. I think I tried last year, but I mean, this is a ridiculous conversation from my perspective. This is so short-sighted. And I really would like to encourage people to increase this. And I don't know what your idea of modest is, but I think we should be right back up at 750. I think that would be a modest investment.
Thank you, Director Nicholson. I see Director Marsh is back, so with your indulgence, I'm going to return to her, seeing how we did lose her through technical difficulty. So please.
Yeah, it could happen again. I'm holding my charger a certain way and it's charging. Well, it's going to take 40 minutes to charge apparently, but it was fully charged when we started the meeting. So I've kind of lost my place and I've missed most of what everyone said, except Director Nicholson, who I totally agree with. I want to point out that some of the most respected people in their field have written to us about this. Genevieve Singleton, who says, what are you leaving for 1,000 years? and David Slade. You know, we have a referendum in 2008, I believe, where we got permission from the people to, not permission, actually direction from the people to charge them $5 per 100,000. And until we get them driving around in their vehicles like North Cowichan had over something, or sending hundreds of letters, I do not believe a dozen or so letters should change that direction. I think that we should also be aware that during COVID, people are not really thinking that very much about our meetings. They're thinking about how are they going to send their kids to school or not? Is that sniffle COVID? Do we need to get tested? The other thing I'd like to point out is that in other crises in the past, human beings had the sense and the wherewithal to learn to do things like plant a garden. In other words, in World War II, they planted victory gardens. So if groceries are going to go up $700 and people can't afford it, get together with their neighbors and somebody grow the potatoes, somebody grow the this or the that. The point is, without an ecosystem, we will not be here. How directors cannot see that after the whole west coast of the United States burnt most of the summer, and after all the flooding events that we've had, and all of our young people who have marched in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, around the world, just kind of blows my mind. So I'm going to make a motion that we restore the requisition as it was originally made by referendum. And if there's a seconder, I won't speak about it anymore. I'll let others speak.
So the motion is to return the function to its full requisition. Is that correct?
Yes, correct. As we were directed to do by referendum, by our citizens who, as some people have said, are our employers.
Do I have a seconder on that? Director Staples? Okay, I will go to the motion on the floor. Speakers on the motion, and then I'll return to my original list. I have Director Smith and Acton on the motion.
I will not support this. I believe that in 2008, there was no understanding of a pandemic, and that if people want to continue to refer backwards, that's where you are. You're stuck backwards. We're in the present day. We're looking at a pandemic. We're looking at financial responsibilities, and those are where we need to make good financial decisions. I will not support this.
I'll add you to the list, Director Marsh. I do see you, even though you don't see me. Director Acton is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I have some questions for staff then. It was my understanding that this requisition was never actually maxed out. It was more around 800. Can someone clarify that?
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Soldera.
Through the chair, the maximum requisition for this function is currently $1,485,160. The most that we have requisitioned in the last few years has been around $750,000, if I'm not mistaken.
So the motion is to put it at 1.4. Is that correct, Director Marsh?
Correct.
Okay. I guess I'd like to see some numbers. I do think it was really short-sighted of us to reduce this function, and I would like to support it, it increasing for sure. It's definitely parks are for sure top priority for people, and I think we need to be positioned well so that we can continue to preserve this place. We do live in the best place, probably you could say for sure in North America. So we certainly want to be able to act quickly if we can. Perhaps we could have some, and I believe that we could reduce other services or make up for some of this somewhere else. So I would be supporting an increase, but I would like to see what I was more hoping for that we would end around the 700 number, but could staff provide us with what that would look like?
You have a point to that, Director Stone?
Though I was just going to remark that Ms. Soldera sent us that yesterday at 10 a.m. Just the impacts to requisition, depending on 250 to 500, 500 to 700, or 750 to $1 million, and then the full 1.485 was emailed out yesterday morning at 10 a.m.
Thank you. Does that suffice, Director Acton?
Thank you. I'll go find that right now.
Okay, thank you. I have Director Staples, Wilson, and Marsh on the motion.
I'm going to wait. I'm just going to go and look up the email as well.
Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can't support this. It's just beyond the pale. It's just too much.
Okay, you're muted again if you're continuing to speak. Sorry.
No, that's it. I'm done. I can't support that one.
Okay, thank you very much. Director Marsh and then Director Stone.
Thank you. So I would just like to point out that in the report, it doesn't talk about just parkland. We don't have to buy land just for parks. We can buy land that will help us to protect our rivers from mudslides because of the development that's happening around them. We can buy land that will help us with our water protection bylaw. We can buy land I don't know about for farming. That I'm not sure. But all I'm saying is there's no more land being made. There's a hell of a lot of more people being made. And honestly, it's our lifestyle, the people that we're talking about now who have a home as compared to I don't know how many billions around the world that don't even have a home, who are going to be paying this. And, you know, if we didn't have a system that commodified housing, we wouldn't be in this mess. But we have a sick system, if you ask me, when you commodify housing and only the rich can afford it, and the first peoples of this country live on the estuary, and when it floods, they have to take a boat to get out and go to the doctor or get groceries or go see their families. You know, there's something wrong with that. But, you know, us Juanitan people, we got to have our basketball courts and we've got to have our rec centers and all that kind of stuff. So I would say this is the absolute most important thing on this whole agenda. And I'm just ashamed that we're even arguing about it, actually. Land cannot be remade. We cannot clone the earth. We are growing exponentially by the end of this century, unless there's a whole bunch more diseases, which, by the way, having animals interface closely with people is one of the causes of things like COVID. So the more land we don't have for animals to live, the closer they come to us. And who knows? I don't know. I'm not a scientist. But it could be that one day we will get some disease from deer because they're in our backyard. And it might kill off a whole bunch of people.
Could we get back to the topic, please?
That is the topic. I'm telling you that, in my opinion, we have overshot the use of land in this world. And we have an obligation to, you know, go back to what the people said. And if they change their mind, they'll let us know. They'll let us know long before we pass the budget. And I think that's all I'm going to say, because I don't actually appreciate seeing muttering when I'm speaking. So, you know, that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Director Marsh. I have Director Sebring, Stone, Staples, and Wilson. Director Sebring, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I've turned my video off again because of the bandwidth issues. Wow, there's been a lot of interesting discussion here. I looked up that email from Ms. Soldera. If this motion were to pass, this motion in and of itself would be a 2.89% increase in requisition. This from a board that directed staff to have a zero increase for 2021 because of COVID. Last year, we were too late in the game to adjust our budget at the cvrd because of the provincial deadlines. I know the municipalities made some major adjustments. We have not done that yet. To me, this is the year where that needs to be done, which is why I was in favor of the zero increase. And now to just go, yeah, well, zero increase, except, we're going to do 3% for this almost. We've heard that we need to base this on science. We also need to base this on economic reality. And economic reality is such that right now, this kind of increase for a single function in the CVRD, to me, is not defensible. You've heard the phrase a few dozen or so letters. I could use that phrase equally for the letters in support of the increase. Yes, we respond to public input, but I've been in this game long enough to know that the vast majority of public input generally comes from folks with vested interests. If you really want public input, if you really want to engage people, what you do is you piss them off. And this would do that. I'm sorry, but I could support the staff recommendation. I could even go along with Director Wilson and I think Kuhn, who said, maybe a small increase. But this motion to me is well-intentioned. I don't think based in the kind of reality that our taxpayers are facing right now. So I'll definitely be voting against this. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Director Stone, Staples, Wilson, and Morrison. Director Stone, please.
Thank you. In many ways, I share a lot of different perspectives that have already been said on both sides of the issue. I opened my remarks before by saying that I supported a return of the function to previous funding levels and perhaps beyond that. My understanding is the most we've ever actually requisitioned through the function was about $750,000. And like I said, I'm open to a discussion over a number of years, returning to that level or beyond. But going from where we are now to almost double any previous high of funding through the function, I just can't support it at this time. But I appreciate the passion on all sides. I just have to say that being at this table with all of you and understanding that some modest approaches to getting where we believe we need to be seems to be the path to make progress as a group. That when we get really, what I would say, extreme at one end or the other of the discussion, that it actually pushes folks away from us making that progress together. And so, although I can't support this motion, I would definitely support a more modest increase this year and having a more constructive and less loaded conversation when we're not in the midst of a budget during a pandemic. Hopefully, as we start to get clear signs next year that we're returning to a healthier place economically, that we can have a less charged discussion about moving this function forward in a really constructive way to get where we would like to be over the next few years, rather than trying to make that heavy impact this year. So I cannot support this motion, but I would support a motion of a more moderate increase this year, and having hopefully, like I said, a less loaded discussion later next year when we can look at the policy without the pressure of budget and try and make a little bit more thoughtful decision without the passions that seem to be inflamed right now.
Thank you, Director Stone. I think we have spoken in the past about a 10-year check-in on this. It has been over 10 years, and we thought we should relook at, first of all, the properties identified in the original one and where we should move forward. I think the discussion outside of budget is a great idea, I did see you, Director Yanni DiNardo. I've added you to my list. I have Director Staples next.
So I think part of this discussion and part of the passion of this discussion is because there's the, you know, that kind of pendulum of going all the way backwards in a sense, where we're keeping it too low, and then going all the way to the other side where for the times that we're in right now, that's challenging for a lot of reasons, for a lot of people, not just at the board table, but in our community. And I'd like to see us settle somewhere in between. I think that that's that stepped approach. I'd like to see us land, you know, if I could choose one, I would choose the $750,000 mark to start moving us up there. And also recognizing that maybe we aim for that for next year, and this year we get us up to at least 500,000. But the 750 would be kind of a good benchmark, I believe, for us to aim for. So I recognize that going back up to the 1.4 million is too much for the time that we're in right now. And at the same time, it's also not, you know, enough when you look at the fact that part of our responsibility is to plan for the future. And so we're in a bit of a conundrum. And that's just the time that we're in right now because we're in a pandemic. So I won't support this to get us back to 1.4 this year, but I would like us to try to land somewhere in the middle.
Thank you very much. I have Director Wilson, Morrison, Yanni, DiNardo, and Stone. Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I said, I can't support this one. I am prepared to go along with other suggestions of a modest increase, and I think I've mentioned before a number of $50,000, which would be a 20% increase in what we've got at the moment. I can't support this one, but I do like what I'm hearing about a modest increase here instead of the full amount.
Thank you very much, Director Morrison. You're next.
Thank you. And I've heard a lot of great comments as of late, and I would just put this out there. I won't support this resolution, but I think that it's been stated that we regressed substantially at the beginning of this term. I too agree that I think it was a mistake to go down to the 150. I think we've made that choice at the beginning of this term. We have no control over what a future board might do, and I hope a future board doesn't have to grapple with this to the extent that we have. And I think that a modest path forward would be a somewhere between where we're at now and the 750 for this year. And this board will still have one budget ahead of itself in its final year, and perhaps we can get to that 750 mark where was a traditional amount. But so I will vote to defeat the motion that's before us, and I would introduce a motion following that would maybe be in the 450,000 range. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have Director Yanni DiNardo and then Director Stone. Then I'm going to call the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to agree with Director Stone and also with some of the other comments that we did direct staff for a 0% increase. And I'd just like to make a comment that with my other hat, I work with the working poor. So I work with people that they have jobs, they have 2 jobs, they're in retail, they're actually surviving us through this pandemic. And they have houses, they cannot afford this increase, and it's year after year, it's accumulation of it. So it's just the bad timing. I am all for parks. I've always been for parks, and I know that parks have even saved us through a pandemic. But my families that are the working poor, you think they can get out on a trail and go for a walk? Not likely. We need to stick to, I could maybe support a slight increase, but I really think that we need to, at this time, stick to our 0% increase that we had directed staff. Thank you.
Director Stone to close.
Well, it's just some clarification. Ms. Soldero, what is the historical maximum we funded this function to? I believe it's 750, but I want to be correct.
Ms. Soldera, please.
I actually have double checked as far back as 2018, where it was actually 850, just over 850,000. I see Mr. Farquhar has shown up on the screen, so he might have a little bit better information at his fingertips than I do, but it was 850 in 2018.
Is there
Do you have something to add, Mr. Farquhar? No? Okay.
No, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Oh, there you are. Follow up,
Mr.
Director
Chair,
Stone.
Thank you. Follow up was just that the comment was made to restore funding to 1.4 million. I just wanted to be clear that we've never funded close to that level previously. I would be in favor of, like I said, a graduated process over the next couple of years to get it to a sustainable level, but I couldn't support this motion.
Are you ready for the question on the motion? I'll call the question on the motion, and it was to return the parkland acquisition to the full requisition amount. All those in favor? Those opposed? Do you need the hands up, Ms. Legault?
No.
Okay, that motion is defeated. Is there a further motion? Director Wills, Director Morrison, I think he had one.
Move that the requisition amount be increased to 400,000.
I have a seconder on that, Director Salmon. I think we've had fairly lengthy debate on this. So can we, okay, Director Sebring.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't see 400,000 in Ms. Soldera's email from yesterday in terms of the tax impact. To 500,000 would be a 5.8% or a 0.58% increase. So I'm assuming 400,000 would be about what, a 0.4% increase in total requisition.
She's quickly doing the math.
Yeah, no, fair enough. We couldn't expect the email to cover every eventuality.
Yes, Ms. Soldera.
0.33%.
0.33%?
33.
Well, I can live with that. Thank you.
So, as I've stated, we've had lengthy discussion, so I think our only stumbling block is landing at a number. Are you prepared to call the question on the $400,000? All those in favor of increasing? Those opposed? Director Smith, Director Kuhn, Director Wilson are opposed. That motion carries.
Mr. Chair, I think you missed Director Ian DiNardo in that one.
Thank you very much. I did miss you. Director Acton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm curious as far as process goes. So I did support that motion because I would support any increase, but I would also support a higher increase. Are we able to do a subsequent motion that would raise the requisition and feel the committee out, or how does that work?
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure where you are, and maybe you're muted.
I think we have a duly moved, seconded, and endorsed motion, and would think that that discussion could come at a later date, but it's entirely up to the directors. I'm looking for some clarification.
Mr. Chair.
Director Salmon.
I wanted to float this, but I thought, would this be a time, maybe it'll partly answer Director Acton's question, but to also recommend that the CVRD parks look into the establishment of the Regional Parks and Trails Donation Endowment Fund, because I would be happy to move that. That's as per the master plan that we did several years ago.
I would second that if it's a motion.
Okay, so it's moved and seconded. There is a motion on the floor. Any discussion on that, Director Acton?
Well, I would have hoped that you could have come back to me so I could have done that motion if that was allowed. But to this motion now, I think this is a little presumptuous of us. We already said that the community, we should reach out to the community and get some more information, see how they, like, I'm not sure. I think we're kind of picking and choosing the steps here. We could ask, I would rather support something that asks staff to come back with options towards moving forward. And I think that we had actually asked for something similar to that last year. So, if we're able to come back to the conversation after this about another requisition number, I would appreciate that. And I never got an answer from, I guess, Legislative Services, or how we could, if we're able to proceed, if I could create a higher motion.
Yeah, I'm struggling myself personally. Director Stone.
All you have to do is refer the question to the Legislative Services, Ms. Legault. My understanding of process is it's fully within the director's right to make a subsequent motion, so, you know, the director has full rights to make whatever motion she likes on the matter, as long as it, you know, even regardless if it was to reduce it. But I believe when a question is made through the chair about a process question, that we should have the Legislative Services folks step in.
Thank you very much. We do have a motion on the floor now about endowments, though. Are you ready to call the question on that?
I'll just speak to it. I just wanted to speak to it briefly. I just think with all the discussion, it's clear that it's going to be quite a while before we can get our parks budget back up to where I think we'd all like it to be ideally. So, you know, at the same time we have COVID, and we also have growing wealth inequality in society, and some people are quite able and willing to help out if they were formally asked or just were made more aware of the opportunities to donate to something like Parkland Acquisition. So my feeling in this motion was just basically, it seems like this was all intended to happen. It was okay that it made it into the report. It just did not happen. So I'd just like to give staff a request that we could go ahead and hear the details on that.
Thank you very much. Anyone further? I'm going to call the question on that, on the endowment portion. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That motion carries, and I'll return back to you, Director Acton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My motion would be to increase the requisition from what it was last year for 2020 to around $650,000 tax requisition.
Okay, I have a seconder, so I'll give Ms. Soldera a chance. I don't think that amount was in the email for the increase, to answer Mr. Sebring's upcoming question. So if you can just bear with me and I'll get some names here. Ms. Soldera?
That would be a 0.93% requisition increase.
Okay, have the percentage increase. I have Director Smith on my speakers list. Anyone else? Director Marsh, Director Smith, please.
Thank you. I will not be supporting this increase. I think that we need to also take a step back and look at that in the 9th of September, we voted to increase the solid waste management function 520. It was 10.75% increase, and the increase in the total CVRD requisition was 1.4. So we've moved just by authorizing that one function to increase by 1.4%. That's more than zero. So if we add something like another 9, so that's another 1% almost that's being added. So we're, without any moving any other increases, we're looking at over almost 2% now. And I don't think that was the direction we wanted to go. So I think it's very important that we step back and take a pause. The solid waste management is part of our mandate under the Local Government Act.
Thank you very much. I have Director Marsh and Wilson. Anyone else? Well, Director Marsh, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually have forgotten the amount we're hopeful to get a grant for transit, but I think it's quite a bit more than what Director Acton is recommending. And I feel very proud, Director Acton, in this atmosphere. I think it took a lot of courage to make that motion. What I am experiencing is what many of us said we would experience were we to cut this when we did this a couple of years ago. And it's only going to get worse, and it's only going to get harder. There's always going to be more needs. One day we're going to have our California fire, God forbid, or our Washington State fire, God forbid, but it will happen. And that will bump things up quite a bit. So I do support the motion, and I'm grateful that Director Acton made it.
Thank you very much. I have Director Wilson and Director Acton again. And
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I can't support this. We've already batted this around, and we've come up with all sorts of numbers here, there, and everywhere. And the next step would probably be, if this one was defeated, somebody will come up with another number. So I can't support this, and I can't support any further discussion on it either.
Thank you very much for your input, Director Acton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm happy that there is some support for this at the table, but I also think there's a few things we're not really taking into consideration. If we were to end our budget discussions with just a 3% increase over last year, it would be a miracle. And it looks like we could almost get there. I think we could look at further budgets in decreasing. We could also look at using more operating reserves. Operating reserves are meant for times of rainy days. We're in the rainy day. We have agreed upon that. And then we also don't have the numbers coming back of what kind of reserves we're going to have from this year from COVID. So then we can start applying those to some of our budgets that we've even already approved. And I hope we will go through it again with a fine-tooth comb and reevaluate some of our decisions already because we'll have a more holistic approach. And we also don't know the numbers of growth. So there's new properties added every year that will take on some of this taxation. So we also do not have any idea what that looks like. This to me is a function that has to be increased and it severely needs to be increased. We've made a huge mistake not supporting it and probably supporting other functions. But it's time, and if it means that we need to start cutting some of them, I say let's do it. But this is not the one to be doing that. So I hope that there's support around the table, and we can work together going forward and reducing some of the numbers more. And we could always reduce it and go back, but it's kind of nice to have it right there, front and center, what we think our maximum number is. And I think 650 is peanuts for today, and especially when we pass it all around the table. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have Director Kuhn, then Director Nicholson.
I find this whole discussion almost unbelievable, really. Why do we as a group even bother coming up with an idea to have zero impact on requisition. That's what the goal was. And now in bits and pieces, we're slicing this apart, and we're going to end up again, like we did in previous years, with an increase. And we will look back and we'll say, well, how did that ever happen? And we can't keep doing that, people. If we set a goal of zero increase in requisition, let's stick with it. And yes, there will be some items cut or some not increased that are maybe quite important, but either we set a goal or we don't. So then let's next time not even bother, but let's just see, okay, we'll go through each item and let's see where we get. I find that unacceptable.
Thank you. I'm having some technical difficulties here. I have Director Nicholson, Salmon, and I think I saw Director Marsh as well, and Yanni DiNardo. So please, Director Nicholson.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you to Director Acton for making this motion.
Thank you very much. Director Salmon?
Yeah, I just wanted to call the question.
I do have a couple speakers left, so if you just bear with me, I don't want to be challenged again. Director Marsh, please.
Well, I hope that wasn't directly at me, Mr. Chair. Sorry if I
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
I think that using Director Kuhn's logic, I agree with him. When we set a goal, we should make sure that we meet it. And in 2008, we set a goal that we would make a requisition to acquire land for parks and or other environmental reasons, I imagine. I wasn't here then. And not only have we never made it, we made it maybe halfway, then we just chose to slash it. So we set a goal actually that was a goal that the majority of our citizens wanted, and then we slashed it. And, there's going to be some other emergency next year. And, to me, it's always a mistake to go backwards. There's an Arab proverb that says, when you find yourself going in the wrong direction, turn around. I've heard many, many people say today, we made a mistake when we said that we were going to cut this. So in other words, we were going in the wrong direction. So I very much do support this motion, and we'll see what happens.
Thank you very much. Director Yanni DiNardo to close, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, but I did see Director Toporowski's hand up, and I've spoken and I have not changed my opinion. I will be voting against this.
Thank you very much. I didn't miss you, Director Toporowski, and I apologize. Please.
That's all right. I won't challenge you, Chair. Anyway, I just wanted to weigh in. I've heard this going around and around. A month ago, we had the same discussion around the 2021 budget, and the board directed staff to prepare the 2021 budget with a zero increase for the requisites. And we went around the table. There was 3 functions that may not have, may make it in there, and 9 others that were, and I didn't write down those functions in my notes here, but with those increases, it'd be 4.1%. So we're still going to have some sort of an increase of something in our budget. And I do hear everyone around the table, but we're having a tough decision of moving forward. And this is just one of the functions that we're going to be talking about today, about increasing. And I don't know. I'm of loss of words of saying that we're going to, send staff off to come back with a 0% increase, and then we're here again to change that. Okay. And I understand. every area needs to fight for their part and for parks and whatnot. And yes, it is good for mental health and everything. I don't disagree with that. And I'm just going to leave it at that. That's my input. Thanks.
Thank you very much. It is a very passionate subject for sure. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor? And those opposed? Directors Sebring, Salmon, Smith, Yanni DiNardo, Kuhn, Wilson, and Martman. And Toporowski. So that fails, I believe. Is there any further discussion on the parkland function? I'm looking at the time and I need a break. I don't know about the rest of you. Can I suggest 15 minutes? See you back here at 1:10. That works. That's 20 minutes, but that'll work. Okay, see you in a bit.
Cameras live.
Welcome back, directors, staff. And we'll carry on with the agenda. I saw your hand there, Director Stone. Did you have something?
No, I was just waiting. I believe we're on R5. I was just going to look to the legislative services, and then I believe these are just allocation budgets, so I would be prepared to move the recommendation on that grouping, but I'll leave that till we get to the item.
Okay, Ms. Legault, I believe we are going to R5.
That's correct. R5, 2021 draft budget for non-requisition functions. So the recommendation is to approve the draft budget for functions 101, 150, 515, 571, 199, 200, and 575.
And you were prepared to move that, Director Stone?
Yeah, I was going to ask if there was anybody who wanted anything pulled there, but there is a net reduction of 47,467 in those allocations, so I'd be prepared to move those as a block.
Okay, and I will look to see if there's any to be pulled. Director Kuhn?
I just have a question for one item. And my question is for the 515. It shows for 2022 a huge increase, and I wonder what that is. Could somebody explain that to me?
You're trying to get to that for you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
So I'm
Sorry,
acting.
I didn't see you there.
That's all right. Yes, I'm acting for Mr. Hitami and also for Mr. Warach, who is unfortunately dealing with a family emergency today, so they're not available. My understanding, I do have Doug Stevens available too to verify this, but my understanding is the planning in future is for full curbside collection. In other words, full service of recyclables, organics, and waste for all the electoral areas. And that's been identified in the solid waste management plan. And so that's been, put in the 5-year plan. Of course, there's quite a bit of work to go through before that would be realized, but we're supposed to indicate that if that's the intent, and as in the plan, it's the intent.
Okay, Director Kuhn?
That is a large increase. That's going to hit us pretty badly next year.
Thank you, Director. Director Morrison, please.
Yeah, I was exactly on the same page as Director Kuhn on this one. And I think that there's probably a little bit more of a sophisticated explanation than we're going to 3-stream, because I looked at the fees. This isn't purely allocation. This is fees collected from taxpayers as a utility. And I would really like to, before this goes to the board for final adoption, I'd really like to get some, is this going to this evening's board or a future one? So it isn't. So I would just like to make a note that we need some further explanation on this one, because it's a huge increase in curbside collection fees. And I need a little bit more information on it before I can wholeheartedly support it.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Director Stone.
Yeah, I just wanted to note that 515 is funded through, not via requisition. I don't believe, but that clarity would be appreciated. So 515 is just through the new services added. I see Ms. Soldera nodding. So that wouldn't be a requisition increase in 2022. It would be that those fees paid because those new services have come online, that people who use the services would be paying for them. But I'm happy to have that clarification when it comes to the board.
And I think Mr. Dennison had something there. You're muted, sir.
Just to be clear, that would not be across the board either. So electoral areas that currently have, say, waste collection and recycling would not see nearly the change that it would be in an area that has just recycling only. So it's not across the board. It'd be variable depending, and of course, a much increase in service too if they're getting waste service where they weren't before. So.
Thank you for the clarification. So we can look for this to come back with the further details. Are you ready for the question? Director Kuhn.
Yes, just one more question on 571. There is a fair high amount stated for consultants. What is that all about?
Ms. Soldera?
So budget 571 is our asset management, and I would defer to Mr. Tokarak, who I believe is online. But my understanding is the plan that was approved by the board with the approval of gas tax funds has a number of projects being completed in 2021, including the implementation of our asset management software and the need for the consultants to assist with that. And that is also not a requisition function, it is funded through general government and through the gas tax allocation that the board has assigned to it.
Okay. Anything further? I'll call the question on R5. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion carries. Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item R6 is a report from Finance Division on Function 520, Solid Waste Management 2021 budget for information.
Okay. Anyone want some pull from this or looking for direction? Director Stone.
I know Mr. Warich and Mr. Hatami are not here today, so I think that this is an informational report. So I guess my question through to staff is that obviously there will be a more in-depth discussion to come on this item. Is it expected that Mr. Warich and Mr. Hatami would be here to address our questions at that time?
I'm seeing nodding from the CAO and Ms. Soldera.
Sorry, just to add that the board did actually review the attachment to my report at a previous meeting and has already approved the requisition increase. So I'm not sure if the specific details of this will be brought back again unless the committee would directly request, because it has already been approved, but we wanted to make sure that it was brought forward again here just as part of the budget discussions so that it was part of the budget process in its entirety.
Mr. Follow-up, Mr. Chair. So that being said, then it is already included in the schedules on the website. Thank you.
You're getting a yes.
Thank you.
Director Smith.
Yeah, thank you. So that was partly my question, but so if I have this right, this is basically our last time to look at the solid waste budget again before we adopt. Ms. Caldera?
Through the chair, all of the budgets will be brought back as a whole for any reconsideration at any time on January 25th and 26th when the board considers the complete budget and all the changes that have been met to date. So you will always have the opportunity to look at it again at that time.
Okay, follow up. Just this is our, I think, our largest increase, our largest overall amount. So I hesitate to go into it if the two staffers aren't here today, but also hesitate to leave it till the very last meeting. So maybe we should go into it. But I'll think on that and go to the next person.
I have Director Smith, Director Acton, and Director Stone. Director Smith, please.
Thank you. We had full discussion on this, and there was a presentation on the 9th of September. I'm not sure if I think it was, this is the one that I referred to earlier, that the increase for this particular function.
Your audio is breaking up, so if you can just mute your video.
This function has a 10.75% increase, 602,000 approximately, and in total requisition, the amount is 1.4. And this is one that is one of our mandated functions under our Local Government Act. So I want to make sure that we keep track of this one as we move through the rest of the functions. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Acton. That did help. Or Director Smith, I'm sorry. Director Acton was next on my list. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think, yes, I hear what you're saying, Director Smith, but I think this is a function that we should take a look at again and understand what kind of reserves are left over, and especially by the end of the year. This is a huge increase, and this is where we could actually make, this wouldn't be taking away parkland acquisition, for example. It would just be a look at the service and how can we kind of sharpen our pencil here on this one, and what if there's anything that could be used for reserves or operating reserves, capital reserves. I think we should be looking at all of it.
Thank you very much.
I guess I could ask staff again what they're at, or if they've been updated since the last time. The reserves, that is.
Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah.
Ms. Soldera.
So the reserve schedules on the website are as at December 31st, 2019, with any potential additions or subtractions to be used during the 2020 budget included in a column for everyone's information. We don't actually update those figures until the end of the year because we won't know all the expenses that we've incurred or any surpluses that we have. So we update them after we've completed year end.
Thank you. Does that answer, Director Acton, or you're fine for now? Okay. I have Director Stone, Morrison, and then Salmon.
Trying to wave you off there, Mr. Chair. I'm fine. I was just going to reiterate the point that we won't know those updated balances until the year end is passed, which, referring to Director Smith's comments, were what we were talked about just a couple of months ago with those presentations.
Correct. Thank you. Director Morrison?
Yeah, and much along those very same lines, I would like to have another crack at this before it goes before the board, because we will have some year end. But I went over this with a fine tooth comb as well, and I don't see a whole bunch of wiggle room. And I think that it really boils down to some very basic questions that were asked in the staff report earlier. Do we want to reduce or start charging for the free tipping for yard and garden waste? Do we want to reduce services to the contracted services we have to the south end? We did a full-on, I forget what the process was called, just a number of years ago on every single aspect of solid waste. And I don't see a lot of room to move, but hopefully we will have some dollars left over at the end that we may be able to redirect to some requisition reduction on this. So that's the areas that we need to look at. Are we going to start charging for free tipping and then incur the having dumping in the bush again? So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have Director Salmon next.
Yeah, thank you. So, yeah, just looking back, I think the staff report, when we looked at this the first time, it did give us, I think, 6 different options of partially reduce the requisition. So I think I agree it's the big one. But if we look at it again, January 25th and 6th, if that gives everybody a chance to look at it again, and Director Martman wasn't here, can look at that and have a really good discussion before we finalize this. It'll also give us time to know where we're at overall with all the other functions or close to where we're at. So I'm happy to wait till Jan 25th, 26th. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Just a question, if I may, through to Ms. Soldera. By the 25th and 26th of January, will we have an indication of what the reserve amounts may be for 2020? I'm getting a shaking of the head, yes. And at that time, once we know what those reserves are, then the board can decide if there's some allocations they would like to implement within that reserve to decrease the requisition, I'm sure. So on this one, any more speakers? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion carries. We'll look for some further discussion in January on this one, I'm sure. Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. R7, report from Parks and Trails 2021 draft budget function 280 regional parks. And the recommendation is that the 2021 budget for function 280 include an increase of $106,188 over the 2020 budget.
Okay. Director Salmon.
Yeah, just a question. I'm just trying to pull up that report, but if I recall, it has most of it was the McGee Creek trestle rebuild, saving up for that, and I think in the circumstance there was an option to defer it. I would prefer that one for this year, given all our other pressures in COVID. So I'd be not in favor of this recommendation, but I'll hold off to see if others have comments.
Okay, I have Director Morrison and Acton, but I see Mr. Farquhar popped up there. You're just waiting to answer questions, aren't you? Okay, Director Morrison, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess this will be through to staff. But I look at this as being one of those. We could perhaps make some strategic decisions on this one. This is an asset that needs to be replaced. That the decision was made before COVID that you would try and put money away in the bank and be able to pay for it lock, stock, and barrel. Now, my understanding is that staff have done a fair bit of work on getting drawings and the likes together, and so just borrowing costs are at an all-time low, and I know that our finance staff are good at making these or acquiring the funds for our use. What I would like to know is there any good reason why this project couldn't proceed with the borrowed dollars? The cost to borrow is at historic lows. And with the dollars that have been put away to this point, get the work done. This is, I think, an opportunity as opposed to putting it off to where you may not even want to put the money away in this next year's budget, but this project could be done with borrowed funds and not incurring huge interest costs in the borrowing. Mr. Farquhar, do you have any thoughts on that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would actually defer to Ms. Silvera with regards to advantages or not of short-term borrowing. But as noted in the report, the project itself is not identified until 2024. So certainly the option of deferring costs to 2024 and applying short-term borrowing at that time to fund up the project, as noted in the report, is certainly an option for consideration by the committee.
Director Acton, please.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was wondering, but you were muted. So I personally would like to see this payment or the putting away of the money deferred. I think it can be a large enough chunk to make a bit of a difference. And, you know, these are perfect projects for getting some of this recovery funding or community resiliency. It's a trail. It sounds good. We're shelf ready. We could produce a nice little drawing. Like we can actually do quite well for this kind of, and it's not a lot of money. This is a no-brainer for getting any grant funding. We have no idea how much is coming down the pipe. And this one is a perfect example that everybody benefits, and it creates that health resiliency. It's a perfect one. I think we should wait on funding it and really put a big asterisk beside it for staff to recognize that we'd love for them to go after some grant funding on this one.
Shovel ready, shovel worthy. I have Director Smith, then Director Marsh.
Hi, thank you, Chair. Mr. Farquhar.
You might want to do your video again, Director Smith. Mute your video again.
They hardwired me. Oh my God. Okay, here we go. So I'd like to know, maybe Mr. Farquhar can explain to me where we're at with the Cowichan Valley Trail from North Watts Road to the town of Ladysmith boundary. I know that my daughter was getting braces when the town of Ladysmith did their the sidewalk to the boundary, and she's now 37 years old. So something has not transpired between North Watts when it was finished, the Cowichan Valley Trail, and that connection. We have so many people that are using that trail. They're running across the road. We had a man hit and taken out by air ambulance in a helicopter. This is a priority that needs to be addressed as quickly as possible. Yes, I understand a trestle is important, but I think that when you're looking at 14,000 people that live locally between Ladysmith, Saltaire, and Chemainus, we're missing a section where we're not even public safety. So when will we be seeing that? Where is that in this budget? Thank you.
Mr. Farquhar, any response?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The CVRD has currently engaged a engineering design firm. They are working on assessing and laying out and determining costs and design requirements that meet both for potential parking lots in the North Watts Road area, given the interest there, as well as the 300-meter plus or minus connection between the end of the trail within the rail corridor, under agreement with Island Corridor Foundation, and the boundary with the town of Ladysmith, where they have their roadside paved pathway on Chemainus Road. We're anticipating that work to be done in terms of the preliminary work for review by Ministry of Transportation, who will be the approving authority in terms of any crossing of Chemainus Road and a roadside pathway, as well as approvals by Island Corridor Foundation in terms of any incorporation of a formal parking area at the North Watts Road area. We're expecting to get some information to provide to those entities by mid-February. There'll likely be some time for those entities to review, get back to us with their considerations and or approval. So I'm anticipating by spring of this coming year, that ideally will have their full endorsement and approval and a Class A cost estimate. That's what it'll take to build not only a parking lot, but also complete that trail connection. Thank you.
Follow up.
Thank you. Follow up.
Follow up. Yes. So are you indicating that there will be funding in the 2021 budget to do the work, not just the design and that part?
Mr. Chair, at this time, the Regional Parks budget does not include any capital funding for completing of the work that I've just outlined. But ideally, we'd be bringing a report back with a Class A estimate for consideration by the committee and board in terms of how we could move forward in terms of funding that.
Thank you.
Follow up. How will we be able to get some funding for next year for that? Because this is way too long that this has been going on and waiting, and there's more and more people using that trail than ever before. And the amount of people that are running across the road is ridiculous. People aren't doing 60, they're doing 80. If we have another accident that involves a pedestrian, this doesn't bode well for us as a board that we have this very short connection that has been sitting there for years and years and years. And public safety should be addressed. This is such an important item. We spent, I don't know how much time talking about a parkland acquisition fund, and yet we have X amount of meters that need to be addressed as quickly as possible. A parking lot isn't going to necessarily benefit the pedestrians. We could move along without the parking lot. We could move in some direction, but we need to have the funding in place. And how can we have that in this budget for 2021 to address this issue?
Mr. Chair, that would be a direction of the committee to make an appropriate motion to include funds for expenditure in 2021. And at this point in time, I would suggest that no less than $300,000 be considered for budgeting for 2021 for such a project.
Okay, I'm going to move on to my speakers list, and if I see you pop back up, Director Smith, I'll watch for you. I have Director Marsh and Director Acton.
Yeah, I was going to. I was lost at where we were, and now I know where we are. But I just almost want to say it's kind of a point of order. This is, I got chastised for bringing up something that, I was going to read that was very pertinent to that actual requisition.
Director Marsh, can you turn your video off? Can't hear you.
Yeah, we're having problems with your audio.
Okay, sorry. So I just think that we shouldn't be adding something new to the budget this year. I've heard a lot of people are already upset about how much has been added. So I don't know why we would start something new this year, and why would we be discussing it right now if it's going to be next year?
Thank you, Director Marsh. I have Director Acton and then Director Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to propose a motion that the line item for the McGee Creek trestle be zeroed out, and that staff look at grant funding opportunities for that one. If someone would second that motion.
I think I do have a seconder. Would you like to speak to that?
No, I just think that this is, okay, sorry. This is an opportunity to just trim the fat a little bit, and we can still move forward with the project. The design work's being done. It's, like I said before, it's certainly project worthy or grant worthy. And it's an amount that we could start saving for again next year, or even plan to fully fund it or through capital reserves or operating reserves.
Thank you. Mr. Farquhar?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just want to remind the committee, this is a project in our asset management program that is identified for 2024. We certainly concur going after grant funding, but such actions wouldn't be done for a few years because typically grant programs have a limited time frame for expenditure. It would also give the committee time to also consider various options in terms of funding as well. But certainly not including it in the 2021 budget, as outlined in the report, would have no effect other than having to look in future years how to actually fund the project in 2024.
Thank you. Director Stone next.
So although it's not, referred in this budget, my comment is actually not related to the motion that's on the floor. So if you could just come back to me after we deal with the motion that's on the floor, it'd be appreciated. Thank you.
I shall, and I saw Director Smith's hand. Is this to the motion or something else? Any further to the motion? To defer? I will call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That motion carries, and I will return to Director Stone.
Thank you. So I understand and I support the bigger conversation around the crossing that Director Smith referred to. I also would support that the safety issue with the crossing should really take priority over the parking lot, and that funding that and working with the Ministry of Transportation on the safety issue should really be a priority. And to that end, I have spoken, and I understand that the rail corridor prevented us continuing the trail all the way through to Coronation Square, and hence the roadside pathway starts at the border with Ladysmith. However, the corridor width is retained up until the Sunny Saltaire sign, as we used to call it, and there used to be a trail there where as children we would cross the road there because there's long distances on either side of that crossing that there's clear view, straight direction both ways. The issue that we have is that the trail ends now at North Watts Road, which is really a blind spot. Anybody who's been there knows what I'm talking about. So I would really appreciate if staff would take it under advisement to say, hey, can we go back to ICF and really look at that last, I'll call it the last mile, but it's the last couple of 100 meters to where the roadside pathway is, and look at putting the crossing in there and continuing along the railway until that crossing is in a safe place. I do not believe MOTI will approve a crossing at North Watts Road. I think it would be dangerous, but I'm not MOTI. But I just want to say, Director Smith, to your points as well, Mr. Farquhar is right in that these crossings will have to be approved by the Ministry of Transportation, and we can push on them, but we can't supersede their approval. So I would just put that out there. I'm not sure how we address it. I don't believe that the crossing itself necessarily needs to be a $300,000 investment. I think that refers to the parking as well. But being a user of that end of the trail, the 3 times we've taken our bikes there, parking has not been the issue at North Watts Road. The crossing has been. So I'll leave it there because I know that's not what we're talking about. We've made the budget decision, but I would appreciate some support for Director Smith on the crossing concern.
Oh, fair enough. Thank you very much. I have Director Smith and Director Sebring.
Thank you very much. I'd like to just let everyone know that the Ministry of Transportation did issue a permit, and it was approved, and it was in October 2019, and it expired in October 2020. So we missed a whole year of approval by MOTI for that area, and we need to move forward on this. I can't say enough about this. It's definitely a safety issue, and I know that Mr. Farquhar has been working on it, and I know that he's been trying to include the parking, but as Director Stone pointed out, parking is not necessarily the issue we need to get the public safety issue moving. And I would really like to make a motion to move this project into the 2021 budget. And if it requires a loan, the loans are interest is quite low at this time, but I think it's important that we move along with this. And if we knew the amount that there was for a cost without the parking lot, this would be something that I would like to move forward if there was any estimate on the cost without the parking lot.
So you're moving that. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Director Yanni DiNardo. Discussion on the motion. Director Nicholson.
Thank you. I am super sympathetic to Director Smith's issue. I think that there are issues like this in the Parks and Trails programming, and I am finding it extremely challenging to get work done that I have hoped to get done regarding trails and roadside pathways ever since I started this job, which was 6 years ago. And so I feel very uncomfortable, despite the safety issue, of having something jump ahead of the queue, or if there is a queue, or without sort of criteria for how we establish what's a priority in the work plan for next year when we do that on the fly at a budget meeting like this.
Thank you very much. Anything further to the motion? Director Yanni DiNardo and then Director Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, but I would like to speak to the safety issue. We talk about risk factors and all of that and all the emergencies, and seeing that this one recently, we wait for somebody to get hit, we wait for somebody to get killed. Ministry of Transportation does that all the time. And this doesn't seem like it was in a queue. It seems like it was always online and it's been left behind somehow. And now this tragedy of someone being hit has just raised the bar. So I don't see it as outside of the queue at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Looking at my list, I see that I missed Director Sebring. Did you have any input on the motion, Director Sebring?
Not really, Mr. Chair, although I was going to ask a question, and I guess it's germane to the motion. I mean, we've taken out the McGee Creek trestle. How much money did we save in doing that? And, you know, what we haven't heard from staff is, you know, what would this work on the Northern Trail in Saltaire cost minus the parking lot? Do we have an estimate? Is that potentially a bit of a saw-off, what we've saved on McGee Creek we allocate to this? I'm just trying to wrap my head around the dollars here.
I see Miss Soldera, Mr. Farquhar, so we'll go to Miss Soldera first.
So the McGee Creek project was not actually included in the 2021 budget. It was presented as a business case to exceed the 0% mandate. So it is not in the budget for function 280.
Thank you very much.
So I'm sorry, why did we then pass the motion we did to take it out? And what impact did that have on the budget? I'm a little confused now.
Ms. Soldera.
So my understanding of the motion would be that it would not be approved. So the budget as presented or as it appeared on the website would remain to us to not approve the McGee Creek Trestle project to be in the 2021 budget.
So the position increase for this particular function is still at 0.
Yes, it is.
Irrespective of the motion.
Did you have further input, Mr. Farquhar?
Not with respect to the McGee Creek Trestle or the budget, Mr. Chair, but in terms of the question around what this trail connection project would be with or without a parking lot. As I mentioned earlier, we have the engineers currently working on assessing options. Back to the early comment by Director Stone about consideration of a crossing farther north from North Watts. That is certainly what the engineers are doing. They're looking at options that we'd want to work with Ministry of Transportation in identifying a safe crossing location. Part of the challenge is the fact that we are also obligated under our agreement with the Island Corridor Foundation with respect to crossing of roads with a trail in the vicinity of a road crossing. That has cost implications as well. So they've been looking at a full array, everything from a crosswalk right at North Watts to avoid having to cross a trail on North Watts Road next to the rail corridor, and also crossing opportunities farther north, and also what that would mean in terms of additional costs to put the pathway across North Watts Road adjacent to the rail corridor. So I would still stand at this time that somewhere in the order of $300,000 would not be unreasonable at this stage with respect to the uncertainties around the final alignment that will be approved by Island Corridor Foundation and the Ministry of Transportation in respect of where that trail would cross Chemainus Road in terms of wanting to consider it for a 2021 budgeted project. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Director Morrison and then Director Acton.
Okay, I think we're getting somewhere because that was the clarification that I was seeking. It's really difficult when you're dealing with MOTI to sort of nail down. So if I'm hearing what Mr. Farquhar just said, it's really not best practices to on the fly put something at the top of the list, but I'm hearing that we might be able to, if we were to say add a $300,000 figure to capital and perhaps make preliminary funding so that it's at least in the budget through short-term borrowing, then we can actually have something budgeted, and then we can get the Class A cost estimates and the like, so that could be brought back for further approval. But that at least positions it so that it's in the budget and can be acted upon further authorization from the board to proceed. So I would make a motion to that effect if finance agreed that that would be the way to position it in the budget for 2021. And then we can act upon it once the estimates are in and the approvals and the negotiations with MOTI. Does that make sense to staff listening?
I think we do currently have a motion on the floor, but
rats.
Given that, no, I understand. I'm not sure if an amendment to that effect would be appropriate or not. Looking to Ms. Legault on the original motion and then the intent from Director Morrison.
So the original motion was to include the Northern Trail and Saltaire without the parking lot in the 2021 budget. And I'm sorry, I was dealing with another matter and didn't catch Director Morrison's comment.
Would you like to reiterate, Director Morrison?
Certainly, and this is more for finance's perspective that that a $300,000 capital project be included in the budget and that be funded potentially through short-term borrowing.
So with the addition of the short-term borrowing amount of $300,000 to the original motion, would that be appropriate?
I think that would be an acceptable amendment.
Is the mover and seconder okay with that? Okay, any further? Do I have any further speakers? Director Acton, and then Sam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not, I feel comfortable supporting this as more as directing staff to come back with a suggestion of how they could incorporate it into this year's budget and looking at ways to have a zero increase on this function. So that does it mean that we have to bump another project, or does it mean we could use reserves? Or my understanding is we might still have some communal gas tax money. And it also sounds like it's perhaps something that's not going to start even this year right away. So why are we funding it? I think it's being a little presumptuous on the fact that we have the solution, and also a little irresponsible since it sounds like it's not going to even happen this year necessarily. So I would prefer to see this go back to staff. We don't have to approve this budget today. we can refer it to the next budget meeting and have it solidified then.
Thank you very much. I have Director Salmon, I believe.
Just to be clear, so what would there be an impact on requisition, and if so, what would it be?
Yes, Ms. Soldera.
So all short-term borrowing comes with an obligation to make principal and interest payments. I can't tell you off the top of my head what that would be for the year. It would depend on a number of factors, such as the total amount to be borrowed and what time of year we would be borrowing. So I would need the opportunity to spend some time looking into this before I could give you a definitive answer.
Okay, thank you. So it sounds like I agree with Director Acton that we should defer and get the full information.
I thought I heard you were going to call her Professor Acton.
Almost did.
Okay. I tend to agree, but I have Director Sebring and then Director Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I'm trying to figure out the impact on requisition here. It's borrowing, so I'm sure it's minimal because we've got 5 years or 10 years, whatever it is, to pay off the 300 grand. But again, to get my head around the context, and I'm going back to the staff report here to present the business case for an 8.95% increase in the draft budget for Function 280. You recommended that regional parks include an increase of $106,000. Is that what we took out when we got rid of the McGee Creek Trestle? I'm still trying to figure out where we are right now in this function in terms of requisition before I make a determination on where I am with this motion. And Director Smith, with all due respect, this is a priority. I totally support what you're saying. I'm trying to figure out where we are dollar-wise, because we have not passed the staff recommendation on the $106,188. We've taken out the McGee Creek Trestle. What does that mean? What does that do? Are we back down to zero?
I see shaking.
Well,
We're
that's
back
me.
down to zero.
Okay, so the 106,000 was McGee Creek, so we're back down to zero. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. I would support the motion. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Have I missed anyone, Director Morrison?
All I'm suggesting is that the motion and the amendment is a placeholder for staff to go away and work busily at getting the more hard detail for us to approve at a later date. This will have the project in the budget, and we will have a chance to have another look at it, but it's in the budget. Support the amendment and the main motion.
Okay. Are we ready for the question? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? See Director Kuhn and Director Marsh opposed. That motion does carry. Ms. Legault, moving on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. R8, report from Finance Division on the Environmental Services 2021 draft budgets. Proposed recommendation is that the 2021 draft budget for functions 131, 530, 531, 532, 535, and 540 be approved.
Anyone want anything pulled from this? Director Nicholson?
I just have a question about number 5.
Okay, let's carry on. Go ahead.
This is about the liquid waste management plan for the central sector, and it's down quite a bit. And I am wondering where we're at with that, and is this normal that the budget goes up and down?
Anyone available for that?
If I may, through the director, through the chair. Sorry.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Currently, the cvrd is responsible for the central sector liquid waste amendment. I think, as we all know, the amendment that dealt with the outfall is currently in process, and so we have been requisitioning in anticipation of a full cycle amendment, as indicated by the province, some expectations in terms of other issues that need to be dealt with. And so we've been requisitioning for the last few years, putting money away so that when we conclude the South Cowichan Liquid Waste Management Plan, we will have the full value that would be required for that process, to start the process off and do it wholesomely in terms of its application.
Okay, Director Nicholson, follow up or?
No.
You're good there? I saw a bunch of hands, but I didn't get names. Director Kuhn, anyone else while I'm looking? Director Kuhn, please.
I just have a quick question on the function 532. You have strategic partnership, $60,000. Is that the watershed board?
We're getting to that for you.
Yes, that is. I can advise, Mr. Chair. That is a strategic partnership, scout 50,000 plus 10.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Director Kuhn, you okay with that? Okay. Any further questions or comments on our rate? I will call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That motion carries. Thank you very much, Ms. Legault.
On to R9, draft budget for grant functions not previously approved, and so the recommendation to the board is that the 2021 draft budget for functions 435, 436, 437, 438, 439, 457, 459, 458, 459, 472, and 474, 493, 494, 495, 96, 97, and 98 to be approved.
Ms. Legault, it's Michelle Staples, Director Staples. I just wanted to remind you that I have to recuse myself from item R912.
Mr. Chair, do you want to deal with the other items, and then I can move Director Staples to the lobby?
Yeah, let's do with that first. Director Morrison, I believe you had something first.
Yeah, I was going to move all of the items in report R9, save number 12.
And Director Stone is seconding. Further discussion on this one? Can I just have clarification on R12? What the topic is?
Oh, sorry, number 12 was the social planning, function 494.
Thank you very much. Just so we're clarifying. Call the question on the remainder. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? I'll give you a moment to put Director Staples into the waiting room.
And if you'd like, I'd move that when she's removed.
It's done, thank you.
She is out. It's moved. Director Morrison, seconded Director Stone. Discussion on this? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That motion carries. If we'll just wait for Director Staples' return, and then we'll move on. On to R10, I believe. Ms. Legault.
R10 is a report from Finance Division with the impact of exempt salaries on the 2021 budget, and this report's for information.
So just before we start on this, ladies and gentlemen, it is just for information on the impact. If you want further clarification on certain names, etc., that should be moved to a different area, I believe. It would be a closed discussion. So let's be very careful as to what our questions are directed to. I have Director Wilson, Kuhn. Can I see the hands again, please? Wilson, Kuhn, Salmon. Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Looking at this one, I think is a little bit unfair on the staff, given that this board discussed quite considerable rises to the allowances that we as a board would get, and also will be taking a cost of living rise in January. So I'm not happy with limiting the or even stopping any rises to the staff at this moment.
Thank you, Director Wilson. I'm moving on to Director Kuhn.
Just a quick question. There's quite a spread between the highest paid and the lowest paid. Could you tell me what is the lowest paid exempt staff? What is the value or the amount of pay for that?
Ms. Mohan.
I would be happy to provide you that information in a closed session. So one of the
I don't want to know names.
Yes, so one of the, I understand that, but the issue is that for most of our exempt positions, there is only one incumbent in each role. So by revealing the low end of the salary, you're revealing the individual.
Okay, I'd like to have that answer sometime. Let's have it in closed session then. Thank you.
We can move that to closed later on today if you wish to. If you want to add it as an addition, I'm sure Chair would entertain that. I do have Director Salmon next.
Yeah, thank you. I would just like to refer this to closed, please. I think it's the appropriate place and the best forum to have a proper discussion. If I could get a second.
Thank you. Seconded by Director Wilson to move it to closed.
Mr. Chair, there is no closed session on item on the agenda currently, so
there you are. Would we require a resolution to that effect? Director Stone, that was going to be your point, was it?
Yeah, I would say that based on the time that an appropriate referral would maybe to be the closed session of corporate services on January 13th. I don't know. I would look to staff though for a recommendation. We could move it to closed board this evening, but I think that with our scheduling and our staff scheduling, I don't think that's respectful of their time. And I think that way it gives them an opportunity to make sure they're prepared to be scheduled for that meeting to speak to it. So I would make the motion to refer it to the January 13th closed corporate services meeting.
I'm sure the mover and the seconder of the original motion would be fine with the movement to the January 13th meeting. I'm seeing shaking of the heads. Any further discussion on this? Call the question. All those. Oh, I'm sorry, Director Acton. Oh, you jumped the gun, didn't you? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Thank you, Professor Acton. Moving on, Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item R11 is a report from Finance Parks Division regarding Parks and Trails 2021 draft budgets, and the recommendation to the board is that the 2021 draft budget for functions 232 and 234 be approved.
Are you moving that, Director Yanni DiNardo? Seconded by Director Acton. Discussion on this one, ladies and gentlemen. Director Acton.
I'd like to pull number one, please. Or yes, number one, please.
So pulled. Anyone else? Okay, we'll move the rest except for number one. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? And to number one, Ms. Acton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a motion to increase the line item for consultants by $50,000 and to increase requisition by $50,000. And if I have a seconder, I'd like to speak to it.
We do have a seconder, so please carry on.
Thank you. So I have spoken with Mr. Farquhar and Ms. Sherolf. This is for Think Shawnigan consultants that would further our Think Shawnigan charrette forward to be better positioned to receive any grant funding that has to do with parks and trails, and so it's through the parks function, and yeah, at this time to increase it through tax requisition and perhaps revisit that closer to the end of the budget. But right now, I think our Parks Commission is happy with adding this, and thanks for those who will support it.
Great. Anyone further? Director Marsh.
Yes, so is this something that is paid for just by Area B, or is it a regional thing? Okay, thank you.
Director Salmon.
Yeah, hi. To be honest, this one's a bit of a challenge for me to support, but could I just ask how much has Area B spent on the charrette process so far? If anyone knows.
Well, I can kind of, a lot of it was, some of it was tax requisition, some of it was under the parks regional function, I believe, or land use services, maybe 10,000, and some in gas tax money. This project, Think Shawnigan, was more received than any other community input that we've had in the community. And it has identified many grant opportunities. I've even spoken with the province and about some of them, and they like all of them. We're just not ready by having that plan. And they love the idea that we have the plan, but it doesn't give us the cost analysis of all these ideas. And with so much grant funding coming, it would be irresponsible for Area B not to take advantage of that.
Okay, I saw Miss Soldera looking through her files, but nothing there? Okay. Director Salmon, follow up?
So follow up. So might it be possible to get this funding from some of those grants? Professor Acton.
Is that so? Speaking to land use services, it's hard to apply for a grant if you actually don't know how much it's going to cost. So you have permission. They like that we have already gone out to the community, and the community has said, yes, we want it, but then we don't have the price amount. Once we have the price amount, then it's a no-brainer for the grant funders, because the community has already said, yes, we like the idea and we approve this. So it's just getting us ready to be shelf ready and to be more successful at grants, because you have the proper amounts. And further on in the meeting, there's some other Area B budgets that I would like to cut that will make up for any increase.
Okay, is that suffice, Director Salmon?
That last part helps. Thank you.
There you go. Anyone else? I'll call the question on this motion. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That motion carries. Thank you much. Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our 12 Finance Division report, electoral area A supplemental requests. The recommendation to the board is one, that the supplemental request for function 234 Community Parks Area D washroom building remediation be approved.
Moved by Director Yanni DiNardo, seconded by Director Smith. Discussion on this one? I will call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That motion carries. And that will bring us to unfinished business, Ms. Legault?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's no unfinished business, no new business, and I'm just going to check the email box for question period.
Thank you. While we wait for those questions, I just want to thank you all for a very long and productive meeting. Thank you very much for all your input and all your passion on the subjects we did speak about. There will be more to come, I'm sure. Thank you all.
Mr. Chair, the question period submission from Susan Kaufman, Satlam. Mr. Chair, listening to the discussion on parkland acquisition was disheartening and at points troubling, so it is somewhat apropos that the regular corporate services meeting has the code of conduct on its agenda later. Making budget decisions is always difficult, and especially so during a pandemic. However, was setting a 0% budget increase realistic, and did the board seek public input before implementing such a restrictive budget upon our community? And 2, after such a protracted discussion on Function 285, did the committee ultimately approve a 5% increase for parks acquisition? If so, thank you to directors for your foresight.
Thank you very much for your question. And I know that sometimes it's problematic to reach the direction that the board gives on percentage increases, not knowing what is coming down the pipe. We do our best to adhere to what the majority of the directors wish moving forward, and that is what we tried to do during that discussion. I believe the requisition was $400,000, if I'm not mistaken, and that would be an increase from the 250 that was proposed. I'm not positive on the increase. I believe it was 0.33% of an increase on that. If I can get clarification on that, but we do our best to make the most important and decisive decisions that we can, given the input that we have. Thank you very much.
I believe the 0.33, Mr. Chair, was the requisition increase. The increase to the allocation is in the range of 5%.
Can't hear you, Director Sebring.
There he is. Thank you, Director Sebring. I think you said 0.33%.
Yeah, the 0.33 was the increase in requisition. The 5% I think was the increase in the allocation for the function, but that translated into a 0.33 in requisition. That was how I heard staff.
Right. Thank you very much. Anything further, Ms. Legault?
And the final follow-up question from Ms. Kaufman is, although technically not on this agenda, anytime contraventions or perceived contraventions are noted, they should be brought forward. Mr. Chair, as unparliamentary language, interruptions of proceedings, and repeated unwelcome comments that reference a particular topic brought forward by a director in line with the CVRD elected officials code of conduct. I would hope that directors reflect on some of the comments made at today's meeting.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kaufman, and that will be a discussion in later on in Corporate Services regular meeting. Appreciate it.
And that concludes question period.
Great. Would anyone like to move adjournment, or would you like to stay here? Oh, look at all the hands. Okay, moved and seconded for adjournment. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? And again, I thank you all for a very productive meeting. We'll see you in 40 minutes.
Thank you, Director McGonigal.
Thanks, Tim.